Yeah, it's rewind time.
Then I guess I won't tell you about your father. Did you all lie to me? All of you in that room?
We were all told to stick to the story, to protect someone very important.
Oh, I know you're confused. Who wouldn't be? We have something in common. Did I ever tell you that my father played for the Denver Broncos?
My dad was a ginger!
Back in the early days of South Park, Matt Stone and Trey Parker dangled one question over fans' heads. Who is the father of Eric Cartman? This question was brought to the forefront in the Season 1 finale, before being resolved in the Season 2 premiere.
Will not be seen tonight, so that we can bring you the following special presentation.
Before being resolved in the second episode of Season 2. Except not really. That was a lie. The true identity of Cartman's father would be kept under wraps for 185 more episodes, over the course of 12 years, until it was finally answered in what is hands down my favorite two-part episode of South Park to this very day, which just happens to be the two-parter banned from the United States. This is a story of tragedy, how Eric Cartman's quest for truth was undermined by his own actions. Because Cartman's father was killed, cooked into chili, and fed to Cartman's half-brother by Cartman himself. That's right, Scott Tenorman's dad is Eric's father, and Scott Tenorman is his brother, elevating his habit of self-destruction to a brand new level. This is a deep dive into one of the most infamous events in South Park history, a saga that will forever live in my memory as one of the greatest stories they've ever told. This is the story of 200 and 201, the time South Park almost started a war. What do you mean Bloom's already made a video on this? Aw, dude, I've been wanting to talk about this for like a year, with the same title and everything. I was there, man. Yeah, I know I should have just made it sooner then. No need to sass me. Not like I'm blaming it on him, jeez. Ugh, whatever. I'll just talk about the Tenorman kids since that's all I really cared about in the first place. Also, Blooms, with all due respect, I haven't watched all of your video on this yet, so I could write the script without any possible influence. I'm sorry, I'll buy you Wendy's or something. As mentioned in the intro, the first time the identity of Cartman's father was really brought up was the Season 1 finale. Cartman's mom is a dirty— Yo, can I get demonetized for reading this? The episode sees Cartman running all over town, trying to figure out who knocked up his mom on the night of the drunken barn dance, pursuing as many leads as possible. Is it Chef? Chief Running Water? Mr. Garrison? Well, as Cartman discovers, it could actually be anyone, because Liane has gotten around during her time in South Park. After some more shenanigans involving a DNA test and the crew of America's Most Wanted, the episode claims that Mrs. Cartman is actually intersex and that she knocked up another woman. Eric's father is his mother, and his other mom is, Side note, revisiting these episodes for this video had to be the first time I watched very early South Park since like elementary school maybe? Middle school at the latest. And I forgot just how goofy these seasons were. South Park has always been silly. That's part of why I love it so much. But remember how often Cartman would just yell at this poor little cat half of the time for no reason? Actually, remember the intro for Season 5 that was aggressively 2000s and ended with that live action explosion? Fam, why the fuck did you do this? I think fans always remain skeptical of the answer they gave us around Cartman's dad, or were just straight up unsatisfied, so the team behind South Park decided, you know what? Fine, let's give them something better, something crazy, and they waited for the perfect occasion. Man, I'm really bummed that 200 and 201 pretty much have no shot at reruns or making it to streaming. They've been removed from most releases of the Season 14 DVD and Blu-ray, and because of their inaccessibility to the public, there's a very low chance that these episodes will ever be referenced in universe. Which really blows, because of the big twist with Cartman. For the uninitiated, the 200th episode saw Tom Cruise assemble nearly every celebrity that South Park has ever made fun of to sue the town with a class action lawsuit, providing some pretty on-the-nose meta-commentary.
That town thinks they can say whatever they want about people and get away with it.
The only way Cruise is willing to drop the lawsuit is if Stan is able to introduce him to the prophet, Muhammad, whose appearance would be dicey to say the least. as depictions of Muhammad have become much more controversial in the years since South Park's take on him in Season 5's Super Best Friends. So, in the context of South Park itself, Muhammad can no longer be made fun of. A power that any celebrity who's been mocked by the show would kill to have. And that power is exactly what Cruz is after. Wanting to harness Muhammad's goo, yes, that's what I said, so that he too can evade being made fun of by South Park ever again. Cartman uses his hand's alter ego, Mitch Connor, who disguises himself as Jennifer Lopez, to infiltrate Tom Cruise's home with a plan of their own. Mitch wants to steal Muhammad's goo so they can sell it for a ton of money, trying to coerce Cartman into doing his bidding with the topic of his father, his real father. But Mitch, Cruz, and the celebrities of South Park aren't the only ones who are after this power, as soon another opposing force makes their way onto the scene.
Our time is near! Soon gingers will never be made fun of again! The day of reckoning is finally upon us!
Okay, so Ginger Kids is a Season 9 episode that explores Cartman's beef with gingers. You know, the episode Ed Sheeran hates. Cartman pretty much treats all gingers like vampires, but in his own racist Cartman way, so the boys play a prank on him by giving him a makeover in his sleep, gaslighting Cartman into thinking that he himself is a ginger. And how does Cartman respond? Does he have a moment of clarity, realizing that he shouldn't treat people who look different from him so poorly? No! He forms the Ginger Separatist Movement that promotes ginger supremacy, planning to eradicate every non-ginger on Earth. And somehow, after realizing he's not actually ginger, as far as he knows, Cartman's actually able to sing his way out of the situation. But I guess all the ginger kids kept getting bullied after this episode. Pandemonium breaks out across South Park as the town finds themselves in the midst of violent attacks from both the gingers and the celebrities, the latter of which pulled out the big guns, Mecha Barbara Streisand, who goes on an unstoppable rampage. Also, she killed Pip. That's where he went. Cartman confronts Mr. Garrison over his father's true identity, forcing Garrison to reveal that the results of the DNA test were tampered with in order to preserve the truth. So Cartman returns to Dr. Mephisto's lab for answers. But just as Mephisto starts to explain the situation, he's interrupted by the arrival of Stan, Cartman, Kyle, and Kenny. Kyle proposes cloning Muhammad so that both the gingers and the celebrities get what they want, which Mephisto seems pretty game for. But then the gingers pull up, kidnapping the boys and Muhammad. Cartman's separated from his friends as he's brought to an eerie yet familiar setting, a Chili Con carnival, hosted by the leader of the new Ginger Separatist Movement, the one and only Scott Tenorman. Scott Tenorman Must Die is an iconic episode from Season 5 that doesn't really need much recapping. Cartman buys what he believes is his first pubes from high school freshman Scott Tenorman, only for the boys to explain that pubes grow on their own and Cartman's been scammed. After a constant back and forth of Cartman trying to get his money back and eventually just trying to humiliate Scott in general to level the playing field, the 9-year-old orchestrates what's still his most heinous plan to date, a chili cook-off. While Scott believes Cartman's trying to set him up with a free pony ride, where the pony would try to bite his wiener off, Cartman's true intentions are much more sinister, manipulating Scott into sending his parents off to their own demise, where Cartman would then take their dead bodies and cook them into chili, feeding that chili to an unsuspecting Scott, who has a complete breakdown once Cartman pulls back the curtain. Yeah, this is still one of the most out-of-pocket things I've seen in a TV show. Embracing his Joker arc, the deranged Scott Tenorman reveals that he spent a long time in a mental institution after Cartman fed him his parents. Time that he spent plotting his revenge. But along the way, he uncovered a shivering truth. Gathering everyone who once lied to Cartman into the same room once again, Scott forces them to explain the reality of the situation. Lyanne had an affair with a Denver Bronco, getting pregnant with Cartman as a result. But because the Denver Broncos were having a really good season that year, it was in the team's best interest to cover this all up. A plan that backfired horribly, as Scott mentions that his dad used to play for the Denver Broncos. It doesn't take much longer for Cartman to put the pieces together. His dad was Jack Tenorman. Cartman orchestrated the death of his own father and then proceeded to cook his father into chili, which he fed to his half-brother. Because Cartman is a psychopath who will go to any lengths necessary if it means winning a petty rivalry. Scott intends to exact his revenge by having Cartman eat a mystery chili of his own. Lord knows what's in there. But is thwarted by the arrival of the super best friends. Not wanting any smoke from the super best friends or the celebrities, Scott leaves on a jetpack, never to be seen again. Except at the end of one of the theme songs and this one Xbox 360 game that no one played. In the aftermath of this wild adventure, the boys try to console Cartman as he processes that major bombshell. But they're dumbfounded when Cartman reveals that he's only hung up on the fact that his dad was a ginger. He doesn't really care that he killed him and fed him to his own brother. Cartman, come on! Mitch manages to cheer Cartman up with the rationalization that although he's half ginger, he's also half Denver Bronco, which is pretty cool. What makes this the greatest plot twist in all of South Park for me is that although it clearly wasn't something they planned from the start, it still recontextualizes Cartman's actions in a meaningful way. When things blow up in his face, it's usually in that immediate episode. But Scott Tenorman, and to a lesser extent the Gingers, was infamously one of the few schemes that he walked away from unscathed and free of consequence. So for all of this to finally catch up with him through an insane domino effect, though oddly rewarding to see as a viewer. Not to mention, it's a way more satisfying answer to the mystery of Cartman's father. And although he isn't really fazed by being the one responsible for his dad's death, it still led to him finding out something he would never want to hear. That he's got ginger in his blood. Despite how twisted this whole thing is, I do find it neat that we can go revisit these episodes with an understanding of the bigger picture. I also love how many moving parts are involved for this twist to work, dating all the way back to season 1. As someone who's always been big on shows of long-running narratives and continuity ever since I was a kid, I remember being absolutely blown away watching 201's only broadcast on television. Honestly, Matt and Trey need to just bite the bullet and bring the storyline back in some way. Everything with Muhammad can stay in 200 and 201. I get it, but it truly crushes me that so many fans don't even know about this plot twist because the episodes it's in are inaccessible on streaming, reruns, and DVD releases. I feel like Matt and Trey are sleeping on some golden storytelling opportunities with Scott and Cartman, so hopefully they wake up sooner rather than later and actually do something with it. But that's just my opinion, my own thoughts, and I want to hear yours. How do you feel about this development, alongside episodes 200 and 201? Did you think it was brilliant, some real 4D chess, or did you think it was kind of lame and maybe even stupid? Should Cartman's relation to Scott come back into the spotlight, or is it better off forgotten? Let me know in the comments down below.
We can't spend another holiday feeling bad for Eric. There's nothing that could have changed the path he was on.
In 2021, South Park changed the game with 2 specials titled Post-COVID, set in a future where the boys stopped being friends and never found their way back to each other. A future where Stan and Kyle are both alone and kinda miserable, with Stan being a professional drunk
I'm an online whiskey consultant. I'm doing research.
and Kyle an online therapist. Kenny was a brilliant scientist with a Nobel Prize, but of course he dies, and his death is actually a catalyst for the events of this special. And it turned out Kenny's most ambitious project was a way to go back in time and save the boys' friendship. So I don't think he was all too happy deep down either. The only person who seemed to be happy in this darkest timeline was Cartman. He became a rabbi, believe it or not, and had a whole family, a wife and 3 kids. But after the events of the second special, Return of COVID, in which Stan and Kyle are able to save the boys' friendship through time travel, the fixed timeline saw everyone get a happy, healthier ending. Except Cartman, who wound up a homeless drunk in really bad shape. When I first watched this, I just thought, yeah, that's about right. But to my surprise, there were a lot of people who felt really bad for Cartman, especially because everyone else reached the good ending. Which might say a lot about me as a person. Psychoanalyze me in the comments down below. But yeah, after seeing him happy with a family, I get why this could feel like a bitter note to end on. And the fixed timeline wouldn't even have existed without him. So now that season 26 is over, with its premiere Cupid Yee delving a bit into Cartman's mental well-being, I thought it'd be a good time to take a good look at how Cartman's behavior determines the trajectory of his life and answer the question, does Cartman really deserve his future? Yeah, probably, but like, it's a little more complicated. So I actually do think there's valid reasons for the answer to this question being yes and no. And I think both reasons are fairly obvious. On one hand, Cartman is... Cartman. He is basically the antagonist of South Park, and is a character we're rarely supposed to root for. He's committed more crimes than the US president, the most infamous being the orchestrated murder of his half-brother's parents, in which he proceeded to cook them into chili and feed them to his brother. He's made his mother's life a living hell, to the point where they had to live in a rundown hot dog for a season, and generally just has a tendency to drag down the people around him, while also sabotaging himself. If you broke down every horrible thing Cartman has ever done, him ending up as a homeless drunk being something that's deserved wouldn't even be a debate. On the other hand, he is a child, which doesn't excuse any of the fucked up things he's done. But let's not act like this isn't South Park, a show that exaggerates things to the highest degree in the name of comedy. There is no denying that Cartman's character can be framed as a troubled kid with a mom who has a slew of her own problems, and no father figure present in his life whatsoever. No real connections to any other family members. He has no idea how to express his emotions, and while he struggles with self-sabotaging behavior and impulse control on a daily basis, the very existence of alter egos and hallucinations, such as Mitch Connor and Cupid Me, show that there are deeper problems at play. Problems that I believe Cartman is able to overcome, given that we saw him with a stable family and career. Granted, looks like some of those unsavory qualities of his are genetic.
Fuck you, cat.
Hakim!
But then that begs the question, what changed Cartman so much in this timeline that he was able to outgrow his bad habits and become a respectable human being? Why does Cartman get better? The answer to this question is just as depressing as the future Cartman's currently headed towards. I believe Cartman is only able to get better when he's completely alone, something that South Park has actually shown us years before the post-COVID special. Back in season 20's Skank Hunt, Cartman hit a low point after he was falsely accused of being the infamous troll Skank Hunt 42, with the boys destroying all of his electronics and dissolving their friendships with him. It's honestly a pretty tough watch, knowing he's not actually Skank Hunt 42. In the aftermath, Cartman is shown to be pretty miserable as a lone wolf. As PC Principal puts it, he's wandering through the hallways with no connection to the world. Though in the context of the actual episode, it's because he was forced to quit social media. It actually seemed as if Cartman was ready to turn over a new leaf. But one thing threw a wrench into that development: his relationship with Heidi. After losing his friends, Cartman gained a new companion in her as she made amends for falsely accusing him. The two growing closer to one another, and they begin to date shortly after. At first, it seems as if this relationship is bringing the best out of Cartman, as he swears off his old ways much to the boys' surprise, and he even helps Heidi get Troll Trace up and running as a way to counteract cyberbullying. However, the cracks were beginning to show throughout this season as Cartman struggled with being honest about his past behavior to Heidi and was clearly possessive over her as he accused Butters of trying to steal her away from him in the episode Not Funny. And all poor Butters did was agree that Heidi's funny! Although, Butters clearly isn't in the best place either and contributes to Cartman's paranoia.
The truth is, girls hate us, Eric. They're sick of our shit.
He kinda spittin' though! Season 21 shows a steep decline in Cartman's relationship with Heidi, as he wants her to bend to his every whim just like his mom does. His manipulation and abusive behavior is at its peak, and the end result is sweet little Heidi turning into another Cartman. Truly terrifying stuff. But I think it all goes to show that as long as Cartman has someone who's naive enough to feed into his bullshit and enable his behavior, he just won't grow. It's not that his peers are toxic for him, but for Cartman, any attention is good attention, and without the proper help, he will constantly project his insecurities onto everyone around him and envy his peers for having the things he doesn't have, whether that be a semblance of a stable family, a shiny new PSP, or indulging in child labor. So if being alone is the thing that forces Cartman to grow into a better person, then I think the next question would reasonably be, how? How does loneliness cause Cartman to get better? since in the initial future timeline, we never actually see the path Cartman took to end up where he did. And I think it's as simple as loneliness causing Cartman to take a good look at himself and seek help. This is where season 26's Cupid Ye comes into play, as that episode relates Cupid Cartman, aka Cupid Me, Cartman's imaginary friend, to Kanye West, with Cupid Me changing his name to Cupid Ye, and Cartman pointing out that ever since Cupid Ye changed his name and got all into Jesus, he's been acting a little batshit crazy. The resolution to that episode being Cartman forcing Cupid Ye to start medication, turning him back into regular old Cupid Me. Considering Cupid Me is an extension of Cartman, it's not hard to interpret this as Cartman acknowledging that he himself wouldn't be such a hateful, self-sabotaging person if he got help. Now look, although we're talking about a cartoon, I know people can feel some type of way about medication, and I'm not trying to say that medication is the only way someone can get help. I'm just rolling with what this particular episode provided. That being said, Cartman could have become religious and found a community within that religion, given that again, he's a rabbi in the initial future timeline. I don't think there's a clear answer. It could have been a combination of things for all we know. The point is really that his loneliness leads to introspection, which leads to him making a meaningful change. I do think religion could have done a lot for Cartman in general, considering atonement is something practiced in Judaism. And I can see Cartman having a strong emotional reaction to the process of confessing his hefty list of sins and being forgiven for them, which is a very important distinction between this and other times Cartman's almost had a face turn. Because in a situation like his relationship with Heidi, Cartman actively tried to hide his past in the early stage of the relationship and gradually slipped back into his toxic ways. Whereas with religion, he has to be upfront about how much of a little gremlin he is to make any substantial progress. All of this raises one more question. Is it possible for Cartman to improve himself with the boys, to become a better person without losing his squad? And the answer is maybe. I think the problem is that Stan and Kyle in particular have a hard time giving Cartman the benefit of the doubt. Rightfully so. Hell, that was the bit with Cartman and Kyle in the post-COVID special, with Kyle refusing to entertain the possibility that Cartman actually had a change of heart, convinced that this is all an elaborate plan by Cartman to drive Kyle absolutely crazy. While I don't think the boys are inherently toxic for Cartman, I do think that he's dug a hole for himself that makes it hard for the boys to ever take a redemption arc seriously, which wouldn't be the best vibes for him to be around should he ever commit to making positive changes. I truly think that Cartman would have to go through something major that would cause the boys to sympathize with him and motivate him to improve as a person. I think the closest we've gotten to that would have been the aftermath of Scott revealing that Cartman killed their dad and turned him into chili. But of course, Cartman ruined that moment by focusing on the fact his dad was a ginger. I do think it's worth mentioning that Cartman becoming homeless does imply that his mom either cut him off or straight up died. Although with her being absent in that initial timeline, I do think it's more likely that she sadly could have passed. Either way, both scenarios would have a severe impact on Cartman, and how he responds would be pivotal in where he ends up. Does he improve himself or wallow in his misery and only get worse? We see that both are possible. So, does Cartman really deserve his future? Well, it depends on if he's willing to get himself help or not. If he does nothing to turn his life around and only contributes to making it worse, the answer is obviously yes. But if he takes the proper steps to turn his life around, then no. But I think in that situation, he wouldn't even end up like this. It is worth mentioning that Cartman started hanging out with Clyde, Jimmy, and who the fuck is this? In the initial future timeline, but I'm not sure how long that lasted given that none of them are like, hey, Cartman, what's up when they reunite? In fact, he gravitates to Stan and Kyle, so I don't know if those friendships lasted all too long, or if they can be used to argue that Stan, Kyle, and Kenny are the ones that hold back Cartman. Now I want to reiterate that this is just a fictional paper cutout, whose life is determined by two middle-aged men, and real life isn't as cut and dry. I know that. Look, I just know the comments on these South Park videos can get kind of intense, which is why I don't read them. I just don't want to go off the impression that I think everything I'm saying can apply to the lives of real people one-to-one. It definitely cannot.
Children were shot! They were supposed to be safe!
If I should ever be in a vegetative state, for the love of God, don't ever show me on national television.
Skinless chicken, boiled vegetables, and salad? This is just like Auschwitz!
Do you like it, Scott? I call it Mr. and Mrs. Tennerman chili.
For years, many South Park episodes wrapped up with the classic, "I've learned something today," delivering the moral of the story in a cheeky, Saturday morning cartoon kind of way, but with that signature South Park twist. It gave episodes a sense of closure, and the main cast usually walked away mostly unscathed. Most of them walked away unscathed. Of course, that wasn't always the case, and these days we've mostly moved on from those tidy moral of the story endings. Over the years, some episodes have even ended on notes that are downright dark. Whether it's an edgy joke with surprisingly heavy implications once you start to peel back the layers, or a conclusion that's genuinely bleak and not even meant to be funny, South Park has delivered some truly twisted finales. Today we're diving into some of the darkest endings in South Park history. What's going on, y'all? This is Michael, and you might remember me from Cartoon Universe back in the day, the music producer on Steven's secret rap career, and I don't know, the production coordinator on Hamster and Gretel. Y'all saw me, right? Y'all saw me the way I was coordinating. Y'all saw me. Anyway, big thanks to Kev for letting me hop on the round table and talk about one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Don't worry, I'm not taking over. I'm just, setting the stage for my coup. If you want to see more breakdowns like this by me, go check me out on my new channel called Go Play Hero. We'll leave the link in the description down below. And yeah, let's get schmoovin'.
Butters.
Oh, hey, Eric.
Dead Kids is a brilliant but tragic episode. It shows the kids going to school like normal, nothing out of the ordinary, but throughout the episode there are just mass shootings happening all around them, like it's just background noise. They don't evacuate, they don't go on lockdown, they just continue class, and it's equal parts hilarious and sad, because it's really, really real.
Token got an A, but I cheated on Token. I can't hear you, Eric.
Nobody seems to be affected by the shootings anymore, the students barely notice, and the parents just see it as a small nuisance at best. This is except for Sharon. She's the only one who's emotional and still really affected by, literal children dying at school on a regular basis. But she gets gaslit, especially by Randy, who initially thinks she's on her period, but then gets intel that it could be quote-unquote more serious, and that more serious outcome is actually just menopause, nothing that serious. Randy does this big romantic gesture to try to get her to calm down, literally faking a school shooting to bait her into watching him sing for her. By the end, Sharon gives in and comes to the realization that this is just how things are, that maybe she was the one that was overreacting. She has a negative arc, going from the only parent in South Park to contest the desensitization of mass shootings to becoming desensitized herself, having a nonchalant reaction to her own son getting shot by saying,
It's not the end of the world.
Then 2 episodes later, we open up with another shooting happening at the school before panning over to City Hall, of all places. Very poignant. This episode dropped like 7 years ago and aged really well, unfortunately. Mass shootings are still a rampant problem in America, but it seems like people have kind of just gotten almost used to it being the new normal at this point. It's to the point where it doesn't even come up in conversation that much anymore, and it's really just sad. Obviously, the audience is supposed to be rooting for Sharon in this episode until she turns to indifference herself, but it looks like the more time goes on, the more everyone is becoming like Randy.
Who shot up the school? Was it you?
No.
Oh.
You say Kenny, but I say tomato.
Best Friends Forever deals with Kenny being in a vegetative state after being hit by a truck. There's an entire media frenzy about whether or not Kenny should be kept alive, brain dead, or if they should pull the plug and let him be at peace. It's a massive public story. The widespread debate is satirizing the real-life Terry Schiavo case, where everyone was weighing in on the fate of this woman in a vegetative state. The two sides are arguing in Kenny's hospital suite when Kenny's lawyer announces that the last page of the will has been found, and that Kenny's wishes were that if he were ever in a vegetative state, he says, quote, "Please, for the love of God, don't ever show me in that condition on national television." Obviously, it's way too late, and it's a strong commentary on the real-life case they're parodying. This episode aged really well because it feels like people are constantly in a fury all the time about something, fighting over serious interpersonal issues they don't have any education or business fighting about in a public forum.
Stan and Craig might still have luck with the space program down in Mexico.
Mexico has a space program?
In Free Wilsiak, the boys visit Sea Park and believe they hear a whale begging to be returned to the moon. In reality, it's a prank by the marine biologist using a microphone. Convinced the whale is serious, the boys go on a mission to send Wilsiak back to the moon. They try raising money, but no one believes them, so eventually they just end up in Tijuana, where they get help from MASA, which is basically just Mexican NASA. They launch Wilsiak into space with a rocket at the end of the episode. The final shot is Wilsiak's frozen corpse floating lifelessly on the moon, having died almost instantly in space. The credits roll and it's just dead silence sitting on this shot of the dead whale. I love when the boys are still just being kids, just very naive and don't really understand what's truly going on. It's also a good look at how far misplaced sympathy and activism can go when left unchecked. In the episode 201, we get a follow-up on this where Tom Cruise is on the moon, dead next to Wilsiak. We love a good callback.
I mean, it's not like everyone else gets to live and only you have to die. Everyone's gonna die.
Oh boy, Stanley's Cup. Again, an ending that's played as a joke, but a very dark one. One of their darkest joke endings I think they've ever had. It's really absurd. Stan is forced into striking a deal after his bike gets impounded and he can no longer do his paper route. He ends up coaching a terrible, terrible Pee-wee hockey team, which includes a terminally ill child named Nelson, whose dying wish is for this team to win a game. Despite Stan's reluctance and the kid's complete lack of skill, he becomes emotionally invested, sort of. After a string of ridiculous events, the team is matched up with another Pee-wee team to play an exhibition match at the Colorado Avalanche versus Red Wings game. However, the other Pee-wee team bails, so the generous Colorado Avalanche players let them take their spot against the Red Wings, a professional NHL team. The Red Wings obliterate these children. They play like they're going up against full-grown adults. I mean, they lose, and it's just an insane watch. You have these pro NHL players just completely washing these little children. They lose, and Nelson dies. Mind you, Nelson isn't playing. He's in the hospital, but he sees that his team lost, and he passes away with his last words being, "No hope," before he flatlines. That's it. I like the subversion of those feel-good, inspirational sports movies where an unlikely coach gets a team in order to win a big game, especially to inspire like a sick child, but nope, this one is it's a rough sell to newcomers for sure.
Well, yeah, but at least I got rid of all those damn
And here comes the neighborhood, Token or Tolkien, whatever. I'm saying Token, sorry. The only rich black kid in South Park, and the only black kid at the time, feels out of place because he has no one to relate to, but because he's rich, not because he's black. After being told he should hang out with other rich kids, he invites wealthy celebrities to move into South Park, like Will Smith, who invites Snoop Dogg. Obviously, yeah, they happen to be black. The town quickly becomes uncomfortable, not because the new residents are black, but because they're rich. In a role reversal, satire of racism, the townspeople begin complaining about, quote, rich people taking over the neighborhood. Eventually, they resort to Jim Crow type tactics to get them to leave town, like they burn a cross on the lawn, but the cross actually is a T and it's supposed to stand for time to leave, which somehow the message actually gets across, like that's exactly how it's read. Eventually, they dress as ghosts to make them think that the town is haunted, but yeah, they look like Klan members. In the end, the haunting worked, and Garrison says that they can sell their homes and all become millionaires now that they left. The other guys point out that this would defeat the entire purpose of everything they've done to get the rich people out of their town, but for Garrison, his motives were actually pretty literal the whole time, saying at least they got rid of those goddamn... I don't think I could say that on YouTube. He doesn't actually say it, it does get cut off for the credits, but we all know what he's trying to say. Don't really need to explain why this one's dark. It's an episode long setup for this super quick punchline at the very end. It's a reversal of a reversal. It's genius. This actually tracks since we've seen Mr. Garrison have racist tendencies before. Obviously, he was the Donald Trump stand-in and was talking about getting rid of all the Mexicans. Bro literally has a Christmas song dedicated to insulting other cultures that don't celebrate Christmas.
Kim Kardashian is considered to be extremely beautiful.
She's a hobbit. Oh, she said it again!
The ending to The Hobbit just makes me sad. Not the movie, obviously. I haven't seen the movie. Wendy becomes frustrated that Butters is obsessed with Kim Kardashian, explaining that she's heavily photoshopped and actually looks like a hobbit in real life. Wendy tries to show her classmates that these images are fake and set unrealistic beauty standards, but instead she's accused of just being jealous and is totally socially ostracized. When Wendy uses Photoshop to make the conventionally unattractive girl at school, Lisa Berger, look quote-unquote hot and shows the results to the rest of the school, people become obsessed with editing themselves to look better online. Wendy hates this, but she's willing to oblige for her classmates. Everyone wants in. People insist she should do the same for herself, but she refuses. By the end though, Wendy feels pressured into conforming and abandons her values. She photoshops herself and is just crying while doing so, like she's sacrificing a piece of her identity. It's so heartbreaking. This is one of those endings that really isn't played for jokes. It's just a poignant commentary on unrealistic beauty standards. It's an issue that's only gotten more prevalent over time, especially with platforms like Instagram, and it's even started to bleed over into men too as the years pass, albeit with a more focus on status and flexing more than physical appearance. But there are those looks maxing forums. There are those black pill dudes who are beating their faces with a hammer just so they can have a more chiseled jawline. So it's a very real thing that is kind of crossing barriers between genders these days. It feels like everyone is trying to compete with these hyper idealized highlight reels they see online, and if you don't stack up to those standards, you're seen as a failure or less than or whatever have you. So more and more people put out these happy faces with filters and rented out mansions to look like they're living their best lives, but in reality they're in massive debt, or the relationship is falling apart behind the scenes, or they're just not happy in general. Sure, some people are actually as happy and successful and beautiful as they portray on social media, but they are definitely in the minority, and even then you have no idea what it took for them to get to that point that you see online, or what struggles they may end up facing in the future. Point is, focus on your true self. Don't feel the need to conform to other standards if it doesn't align with your journey and happiness.
Just have one question, Kyle. What's muff cabbage? It's a...
So I'm initially from New Jersey, specifically from the Jersey Shore. I know, I apologize to everyone. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've been asked if New Jersey is really like the show Jersey Shore. It's mostly not, thank God. In It's a Jersey Thing, South Park becomes overrun by obnoxious, aggressive people from New Jersey, obviously directly referencing the show Jersey Shore, which was really big at the time. They're starting to take over the country. Snooki wants smush mush, y'all know the story. So what does South Park do? They recruit Osama bin Laden, of course, who sends a fleet of commercial airplanes piloted by Al-Qaeda to kamikaze the Jerseyans. In the end, bin Laden gets a medal for his work and is then promptly shot in the head. Dark way to go, but yeah, he deserves it. He deserves it. Funny enough, this aired before the real bin Laden actually died, so when America actually did get him, they played Osama bin Laden has farty pants and this episode back to back. An unhinged way to celebrate, but I'm kind of here for it, I'm not gonna lie.
Santa's gonna have to kill you.
Woodland Critter Christmas is probably my favorite Christmas special, which they really need to start doing again, man. It was one of my favorite traditions of the show. It's insane. The critters convince Stan to kill a mountain lion. Turns out they're satanic. Kyle becomes a host for the Antichrist. Santa Claus blasts cute woodland animals with a shotgun. What else can I say? It's just art. I showed this to my ex as her introduction to South Park. We are no longer together. At the end, Kyle dies of AIDS, completely unrelated to the insane plot. Fortunately, as dark as this is, it's all just a story being told by Cartman and has no real consequences. That is until Imagination Land, but that's another story.
I call it Mr. and Mrs. Tenorman chili.
Scott Tenorman Must Die is one of the most iconic episodes of South Park. It's an episode that immediately comes to mind to show newcomers. This dark ending isn't so much sad as it is just crazy. Cartman is humiliated after being tricked by an older kid, Scott Tenorman, into buying pubic hair for $16.12. Determined to get revenge, Cartman tries various schemes to outsmart Scott, who continues to humiliate him. Eventually, Cartman hatches a disturbingly elaborate plan. In the end, Cartman tricks Scott's parents into getting killed and made into chili, which he then feeds to Scott at a chili cook-off he put on. When Scott realizes what he's eaten, Scott breaks down and cries before Radiohead, sent in by Cartman, comes in and roasts him for being a crybaby. Cartman licks Scott's tears and celebrates his victory. Stan and Kyle vow to never mess with Cartman ever again. It always bears repeating, no matter how many years pass, Cartman is a murderer, bro. Even if he didn't pull the trigger himself, this was the moment Cartman went to another level of villain. Nothing was off limits for him after this. Not too much to unpack here thematically other than, yeah, Cartman is a supreme level hater. Even Kendrick would never take it this far.
I don't know why you came from the future to snark on me.
The ending of South Park post-COVID, the return of COVID, is one of the more positive on this list, unless you're Cartman. And after that last episode, he probably deserves it. At its core, it's about friendship, regret, and how the way we respond to tragedy can shape our future more than the tragedy itself. Stan, Kyle, and Cartman eventually realize that they can't stop COVID from happening. Every attempt to rewrite the past fails or just creates more mess. But instead of giving up, they decide to go back and fix something smaller but more personal. The moment their friendship started to fall apart. Back at the very beginning of the pandemic, they were going to blackmail Heather Williams for Nuggets courtside tickets, but the world shut down before they could do it. So they go back, pull it off, and give their younger selves a fun moment together. It sounds ridiculous, but it's a symbol of the shenanigans they would get into as friends. That one shared experience of joy and connection becomes the spark for a better future. From there, everything starts to change. The future they return to is completely different from the one we saw previously. Sharon and Shelly are still alive, Kenny is still alive, Butters never went insane from NFTs. The dark part though is what happens to Cartman. In the original future, he had his life turned around. He actually had a family, he was a rabbi, like yes, Cartman was a rabbi, and he seemed genuinely happy and healthy, like a redeemed person, which you would just never guess. Turns out the time around the pandemic was actually really healing for Cartman. But once they changed the timeline and kept the whole gang together rather than splitting apart, Cartman no longer has his family. He's no longer a rabbi. He's a drunk living on the streets. He's the only one that didn't get a happy ending. Considering it seemed as though Cartman actually finally changed for the better and was living happily, it's a little sad, honestly. You're almost rooting for him to have this kind of huge redemption arc as he gets older, considering what an absolute sociopath he was as a child. You can check out the Roundtable's video on if Cartman truly deserved this fate to dive into those specifics, but it's nice to see he's technically able to change, at least in some timeline. On that note, actually has some layers to its dark ending. Cartman's mom, Leanne, realizes she can no longer control her son's out-of-pocket behavior. After failed attempts with nanny reality show experts like Nanny Stella and Super Nanny, like he literally causes them to have a mental break, Leanne finally calls in Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer. Using dog training techniques, assertive posture, calm energy, and discipline, Caesar quickly subdues Cartman's outbursts, effectively turning him into a well-behaved child. Cartman begins losing control over his household, or, Leanne's household, and spirals into an existential crisis. We see his personality split, like literally. It's as though his dark, antisocial tendencies are fighting for control over his newfound well-behaved attitude. In the end, though Leanne is finally in a position of authority, Caesar ends up leaving once he sees that his job is done. Leanne thought they were actually starting to bond, but it was mostly just a job for bro. Left with nobody to hang out with, she slowly starts to spoil Cartman again. Cartman's dark, super spoiled side creeps back up. Leanne says he can have whatever he wants, and we see this evil, manipulative smile return on his face. This is dark for a few reasons. Obviously, for starters, it shows that Cartman does have more of a good side than he lets on, and that he is actually able to change. But because his mom keeps enabling him, he likely never will. This is good for the show and the viewers, since a nice Cartman would just be boring and not feel right. But the implication implications for the character are actually kind of tragic. It's also dark because it's a highlight of just how lonely Leanne is. She isn't married and just sleeps around with random men, and it's hard not to empathize with her sadness over Caesar leaving. But it's also a cautionary tale. Leanne treats Cartman more like a friend here because it's something that's lacking in her own life. It's why she enables Cartman's spoiled behavior and often can't see through his BS. Really makes you wonder how Cartman could have turned out if he did have parents teaching him responsibility, or at the very least, a real father figure in his life. Chef was probably the closest thing, and we see Cartman is actually really distraught when Chef leaves South Park to join the Super Adventure Club, which, oh yeah, the return of Chef is still one of the saddest episodes in South Park. Even sadder now that Isaac Hayes has passed in real life. We get a quote-unquote flashback to Chef leaving South Park to find himself after he discovers the Super Adventure Club. It's played as if this was a previous episode, but it never actually happened. I remember being confused by this as a kid, like I thought maybe I missed an episode and I was just completely lost. I did not get the joke. Him being gone doesn't last long though, as he returns right after the flashback is over, but clearly something is off.
Well, how about I meet you boys after work and we can make love?
Chef now speaks in creepy, disjointed phrases and shows inappropriate interest in children, suggesting he's been brainwashed. We all know the story by now. Voice actor Isaac Hayes left the show after their Scientology debacle, so they spliced in old Chef lines for this entire episode. Well, it turns out the boys discovered that the Super Adventure Club is a cult of globe-trotting explorers who believe having sex with children grants them immortality, just like the Illuminati conspiracy theories. They've brainwashed Chef into joining them, and the boys try to deprogram him and bring him back to the real Chef. They come close more than once, but it's too late. In a dramatic final sequence, Chef falls to his death and is violently mauled by animals. Even though Chef dying is sad, the fact that they went so over the top and gruesome with his death is still really funny. The episode ends with the Super Adventure Club resurrecting Chef as a cyborg dubbed Darth Chef. We never see Darth Chef again. Clearly Matt and Trey were just leaving the door open for a possible return, but again, Isaac Hayes passed away since then, and that's just not a voice you're going to replace point blank, especially just out of respect for what Isaac brought to the character. Sometimes I'll put on South Park in the background while working or sleeping, and I'll often skip that episode. I just hate that Chef had to die, both in South Park and in real life. Like, Chef was such a major staple of the show. His character was practically built into the DNA of South Park. And for him to not only essentially die, but to be reborn and brainwashed into a pedo Darth Vader, it's just such a messed up ending to a beloved character, man. To top it all off, he allegedly left due to Matt and Trey ripping on Scientology, but it came out somewhat recently from his son that he was actually struggling with health complications, and the church spoke for him on his behalf, even though he wasn't in a headspace to be making any decisions. So it's actually totally possible that he didn't entirely feel the need to leave the show on his own accord, but ultimately we'll probably never know for sure. He did return as a Nazi zombie in the Stick of Truth game. Not sure how that works with the whole Darth Vader thing, but clearly something happened in between Darth Chef and Nazi Zombie Chef because Stick of Truth is considered more or less canon. Interesting detail, the wounds on Nazi Chef actually match his injuries from this episode. Nice little morbid Easter egg for you. In Kenny Dies, Kenny is diagnosed with a terminal illness, and for once, at the time at least, the show treats his death seriously instead of as a recurring joke. While Kenny lies dying in the hospital, Cartman becomes obsessed with protecting a shipment of stem cells, claiming he wants to use them to save Kenny's life. However, it's revealed that Cartman actually wants the stem cells for a personal business venture, which is to build his own Shakey's Pizza. Meanwhile, the other boys, especially Stan, struggle to deal with Kenny's condition. We even get a really funny speech from Chef about why God takes away innocent people.
Sometimes God takes those closest to us because it makes him feel better about himself. He's a very vengeful God, Stan.
Man, I miss Chef. Stan, overwhelmed, avoids visiting Kenny, afraid to come to terms with reality. Turns out, Kenny's last words were,
He just said, "Where's Stan?"
"Oh, that hurts. That hurts. It's an interesting play on the recurring gag that Kenny always dies, but as stated, this is treated a lot more seriously. He's dead for the entire season until he just comes back in the episode Red Sleigh Down like nothing ever happened. The boys ask where he's been, and he just said he's just been hanging out. So it's completely brushed off, and we get more detail on that in another episode, or rather, another trilogy. The Coon trilogy is probably my favorite trilogy in South Park, in part due to Kenny's story in it. It highlights Kenny as Mysterion, but also his struggles with what is damn near immortality. He describes how terrible it is to die over and over and over again. Sometimes he sees heaven, sometimes he sees hell, but he always just wakes up with his same orange hoodie. The worst part is nobody ever remembers he dies, which is one of the parts that takes a toll the most on his psyche. I love how they really take the running gag that Kenny always dies and turns it into such a somber character trait for him. We really see Kenny in a new light. It seems like these constant deaths have kind of matured him in some ways. 2 episodes during this arc have dark endings going off the theme of Kenny's constant death and rebirth. In Mysterion Rises, Kenny gets stabbed in front of the boys. They say their classic catchphrase, "Oh my god, you killed Kenny, you bastard," but this time with more gravitas, more emotion, like they really think he's dead forever this time. But then, just as Kenny described, he wakes up in bed. The boys come over and tell him to hurry up and stop being lazy because they have people to fight as heroes. Absolutely no memory of what just happened. They think he just ran away from the crime scene. Kenny lets out a sigh. That's gotta be traumatic to go through all the time. Like, who can he even really talk to about it? Even if he does, they're just gonna forget anyway. He even begs them to remember him about to die, but they never do. In the finale of the trilogy, Mysterion unalives himself, saying he's, quote, gonna go to bed. It cuts to Kenny's mom giving birth to a brand new Kenny, which we've actually seen before in the episode Cartman Joins Nambla. Carol reveals that the reason for this happening is all because they went to a Cthulhu cult meeting. So yeah, Kenny's constant deaths, rebirths, and the reason nobody remembers him dying is because bro is literally cursed. This adds a whole new layer to all of the times that he's died throughout the series. In City Sushi, Butters innocently hands out flyers for a new Japanese restaurant called City Sushi, which angers Tung Lu Kim, the Chinese owner of City Walk. Lu Kim sees the new place as competition and tries to get rid of the owner, Takayama, using increasingly racist and manipulative tactics. Meanwhile, Butters is mistakenly diagnosed with multiple personality disorder by Dr. Janice, a psychiatrist who's ironically revealed to suffer from the condition himself, which confuses the hell out of Butters. Poor Butters. The crazy part, though, in another reveal that has implications for the entire series, is that one of Dr. Janice's personalities is Lu Kim, meaning he has been impersonating a Chinese man for years despite being white. So every time we see Lu Kim throughout the series, it's actually just some white dude, a therapist. I'm not sure if that makes it more or less racist, to be honest. Despite everything, the town decides to let Janice keep running City Walk since he's the only, quote, Chinese restaurant owner. The episode ends with a psycho-style scene implying Janice is still dangerously unstable, so Dr. Janice just gets to continue on being Lu Kim in South Park. He never gets treated for his condition, he never gets the help he needs, just keeps running City Walk, even though he has some pretty wild personalities in him, and one that actively wants to kill him. But at least the town still gets city chicken. Butters really went through all that turmoil for nothing, as he usually does. In Butters' very own episode, Butters is excited to celebrate his parents' anniversary at his favorite restaurant, Bennigan's. His mom, Linda, asks him to secretly find out what his dad, Chris, is getting her so she can one-up him. Butters innocently follows Chris and discovers that he frequents a gay adult theater in Bathhouse. Oblivious to the implications, Butters cheerfully reports this to Linda, who instantly snaps. Later, Butters catches Chris again, who tries to explain his secret sexual habits to his son, but before he can process the situation, Linda attempts to murder Butters by pushing a car into a river with him inside. Chris returns home to find Linda attempting unaliving. They confess their secrets to each other. Chris frames his behavior as an addiction, while Linda confesses to Butters' quote-unquote murder. Together, they decide to fake a kidnapping, blaming it on some Puerto Rican guy, a satirical nod to real-life media scapegoating. Meanwhile, Butters survives, and being the innocent, sweet lad that he is, he thinks it's all a mistake and tries to return home. He's in a CD club and makes a call to his house where Officer Bar Brady answers. Bar Brady, being classically incompetent, doesn't realize it's Butters and hangs up the phone to keep the line mind clear. He makes his way back through a creepy path after getting directions from a strange mechanic, classic horror trope. When he returns, he finds his parents unraveling under the pressure of their lies. After Butters scolds them, they bizarrely decide to follow his example and confess everything publicly. In the final scene, Butters tries to put on a brave face, but admits he's now emotionally scarred. Butters reluctantly concedes that maybe lying does have its place. Imagine having to grapple with the fact that not only was your dad cheating on your mom, but your mom literally tried to kill you. This is just how things go with Butters though, but this particular situation definitely scarred him for sure. Looking at how he turned out in the bad timeline during the COVID specials, it's clear to see how he ended up down the path that he did. And finally, You're Getting Old is a two-parter that really spoke to me when it came out. The endings for both episodes are actually pretty dark. Stan turns 10 years old and suddenly begins to see everything as literal crap. The music sounds like farts, the movies have feces, it's a mess. He starts becoming cynical and negative, being diagnosed by his doctor as a serious condition called being a cynical asshole. Obviously, in the world of South Park, this is considered a real medical condition. Randy, in an interesting parallel to Stan, has a midlife crisis and attempts to reconnect with youth culture by pretending to enjoy tween wave music, even making it himself by farting into a microphone, because that's ultimately how it sounds to him. As Stan grows more alienated from his friends, they push him away. Kyle starts hanging out with Cartman. Randy and Sharon have a serious fight that leads to them separating. She says people grow apart. The episode ends on an unusually somber note with a melancholic montage showing Stan moving away, disconnected from everything he once loved. The flowers are crap, the sun is crap, all his classmates are crap. The jokes are really funny, of course. Those crappy movie trailers are even more relevant today than they ever were, honestly, if we're keeping it a buck. But this is honestly a really powerful episode about growing up and dealing with the world changing around you and dealing with your own internal changes that affect how you see the world. It's even a meta commentary on the show itself. Sharon mentions how everything just resets over and over again, which, barring major plot points, is more or less what happens in South Park. The characters barely age and things always go to some sort of status quo eventually, at least at this point in the series. When this dropped, I was almost 17 and I honestly related a lot to Stan. There were a ton of changes in my life. I was definitely feeling my childhood slip away, and admittedly, yeah, I was kind of a cynical asshole back then too. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, I'm still a snob when it comes to media, if we're being honest, but I was genuinely an asshole about it at the time. Even now, having just started my 30s, it's a relatable episode. So much has changed in my life, both for better and for worse. It can be exciting sometimes, but it's also scary and somber. You lose friends, you lose family, you lose partners, you lose places that you once loved. It can be hard not to feel disillusioned at times, but ideally, you find a new rhythm until that status quo fades away too, and the cycle repeats. Point is, change is hard for everyone, and this episode encapsulates that beautifully. The final montage features Landslide by Fleetwood Mac, and every time I hear that song, I immediately think of this episode. Like, this episode is almost a decade and a half old, and it's still the first thing I think of. The ending hits like a truck. Not only is it heartbreaking, but it didn't get a follow-up until 4 months later, so we had to wait. And that follow-up, of course, was Asperger's. Yeah, I know, after dissecting how emotional the last episode was, this was the one that followed it up as a two-parter, Asperger's. After becoming deeply cynical, Stan is now misdiagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. He meets a group of people who claim they also have Asperger's, but they're actually just self-proclaimed freedom fighters who say they see the world for how it really is.
Wait, it's not a real illness?
If there was a social development disease, you wouldn't call it Asperger's. That's just mean.
The secret society of cynics. They drink whiskey to live in the illusionary world they once lived in. It's played like The Matrix, but yeah, they're just alcoholics using drinking as a coping mechanism. They recruit Stan to help fight the supposed global conspiracy to make everything suck. After giving him the whiskey, it does technically work for him. The world doesn't look like crap, and the modern Adam Sandler movies are funny now. He is really enjoying himself. Meanwhile, Cartman starts a burger stand and Kyle helps him, not knowing Cartman is secretly using his farts as a special ingredient, calling it Asperger's. Yeah, you get it? Okay. His burgers become wildly successful. Stan gets sick of the drunk conspiracy theorists and tries to accept that everything may not be the way they used to be, but realizes that he can still enjoy things, even if they aren't perfect. He actually starts to get excited about the new possibilities that could come for him in his life. And yeah, everything just gets reset back to the same old that it was was before. Parents are back together. Kyle breaks it off with Cartman. Him and Wendy patch things up. It's all good. It's all Gucci. Except this isn't what Stan wants anymore. It causes a whole new level of depression with him. Sharon has a talk with Stan and says sometimes it's just best to stick with what you know, which is in many ways more depressing than everything being uprooted. She's not saying it in a happy tone. She seems defeated, like she's resigned to a life of complacency, even if she isn't truly happy. And that resigned sense of complacency is pushed onto Stan. We get a montage that's basically the inverse to the ending of You're Getting Old, same song and everything. But this time it's just South Park going back to the same old South Park and Stan being at a loss for words the whole time. The boys knock on Stan's door in the morning and invite him to see a movie. He begrudgingly gets out of bed, walks out, but comes back to his room to take a swig of alcohol. And it's really barely played as a joke. Yeah, it's kind of not a joke. This isn't a one-off thing either. That's what's crazy. We see in the bad timeline in the post-COVID special that he's actually a functioning alcoholic, and in general there definitely seems to be a subtle shift in Stan's character after this two-parter. He's less naive, less pure of heart. Him and Kyle are at odds more often than they ever used to be. This two-parter is just so well done and probably my favorite in the series. It highlights the pain of change and getting older while simultaneously recognizing the dangers of staying complacent in mediocrity, recognizing how awful things can be in the world while also wanting to not allow that to consume you lest you drown in sorrow or unhealthy vices. Yeah, man, South Park be cooking some heart wrenchers sometimes, and those are the darkest endings in South Park history. What did you think of this lineup? Are there any that you feel like we missed? Are there any favorites that you have or ones that just keep you up at night? Let us know in the comments down below. Once again, I've been Michael Williams, and you can go check my channel out at Go Play Hero. I do tons of nerdy and entertainment deep dives, and I actually have one on South Park video games that need to happen, so if you want to go check that out, that'd be much appreciated. But that's it for this video. Peace and hey agrees.
If you've been keeping up with South Park Season 26, you may have noticed there's a new kid in town, notably roasting Stan for Randy's toilet flexing in the 3rd episode of the season.
Did you know some people can't even afford to eat? How about caring for something that matters, you bitch?
After watching the same cast of characters for nearly 30 years, with the only new additions often being adults, your reaction to this new girl may reasonably be,
who is this bitch?
Well, allow me to explain. This is Betsy, not to be confused with Betsy Donovan, Clyde's late mother. And she's not just some rando, but a clear homage to her voice actress, Betty Boogie Parker. That's right, the daughter of series co-creator Trey Parker. I'm sure a lot of hardcore South Park fans may already know this, but Betty's role in South Park actually goes way beyond Betsy. Despite only being 9 years old, Betty's been involved with the series ever since she was 2. Her notable roles include being the latest voice of Ike Robowski, Heather Williams, who debuted in 2021's South Park Return of COVID, and Chuck Chuck, child of Man Bear Pig, in 2022's South Park The Streaming Wars. There's actually a handful of behind-the-scenes footage of Betty in the booth over on the South Parkers Instagram account, which I think is run by Betty's mom, Boogie.
Let's do, how about caring for something that matters, bitch?
How about caring for something that matters, you bitch?
She puts in you.
But let's talk a bit more about Betsy as a character. Not only was she allegedly designed by Betty, which makes sense, they look exactly alike, but she actually debuted a little before season 26. And by a little, I mean like 2 years. In the South Park vaccination special, where she was a part of the Little Cuties, a branch of QAnon full of children who were brainwashed through the curriculum taught at Tutoranon, believing that the vaccine contained mind-controlling microchips courtesy of the Hollywood elites. Other familiar faces a part of Little Cuties include Scott Malkinson, Red, and unsurprisingly, the impressionable Butters. The Little Cuties not only tried to prevent our boys from administering the vaccine to the teachers at South Park Elementary, but also recruited Clyde in the Return of COVID special. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Little Cuties stick around in the form of the next video game as one of the many forces you have to battle, just with a new goal that isn't tied to the events of 2021. I've also been playing through the games for the first time recently, and just started Fractured Butthole, and seeing that you have to fight not only the 6th graders, but the girls over at Raisins, really got me thinking about groups from recent seasons that could pop up in the next one. But I'm getting a little sidetracked. The point of mentioning all of this is to illustrate that Betsy seems to be a very politically charged character. I mean, come on. She has an American flag patched to her jacket and went off on Stan for being Richie Rich, despite Stan wanting nothing to do with Randy's obnoxious antics. Betsy already seems like a character who genuinely wants to make a change, whose heart is in the right place, but for one reason or another, she ends up fighting for the wrong side. Obviously, these are observations based off of minor appearances, but they're consistent enough to make me think this is the direction they want to take her character in. And I think that makes for a great addition to the cast. Imagine watching Betsy and Wendy at odds over a social issue. Betsy constantly giving Stan shit because he's now a rich kid, even though he kinda rejects everything that comes from that title. Aside from the PS5, Cartman trying to rope her into doing his bidding, only for it to backfire as usual. Betsy really seems like a character who can mix up the dynamics of the show and breathe some new life into the kids' elementary school adventures. Although she's only had small roles at the time of recording, her frequent appearances in this new season has me thinking that they're setting the stage for her to play a bigger part in season 27 and beyond. But as always, these are just my thoughts and I want to hear yours. What do you think? Should Betsy play a bigger role in the series, or are you fine as her being just a little Easter egg of a background character that serves as a nod to her voice actress? Man, this kid has a bright future ahead of her. Let us know in the comments down below and keep the conversation going over on Instagram and Twitter at RoundtableVids and at AwestruckFox. It's crazy that we're not even halfway through the 14 South Park specials made exclusively for Paramount Plus, assuming the service lasts that long. But what's even crazier is that out of the 6 we have so far, the only ones I really could revisit are the first 2. The post-COVID specials. As someone who adores the lore aspect of South Park, as is the case with many animated series if you couldn't tell, I think it's so cool to see not one, but 2 different timelines for where the boys could end up. Futures that capitalize on character traits established all throughout the series, like Stan becoming a professional alcoholic, or Butter's Crypto Bro persona being derivative of Professor Chaos. That being said, there's a huge part of Kenny's character that is ignored in this special in favor of building the story around his death. And that's his immortality, something that was treated as a major revelation in the show. Kenny's death in post-COVID alludes to him losing his immortality prior to the events of the special, being laid to rest instead of waking up the next day as the only one to retain knowledge of his passing. But how did Kenny lose his immortality? And more importantly, did he lose it involuntarily, or was this something done of his own volition? That's what we're going to figure out today. But before we dive in, a new year means a new South Park season is on the horizon. And just like last year, I plan on covering it episode by episode. So consider joining us for the ride by subscribing to the Roundtable with notifications on so you don't miss a single video about South Park Season 27. And check out our big mega compilation on Season 26 after this video. Alright, enough shilling, on to the main event. Kicking things off with a refresher for those who need it, after over a decade of, oh my god, they killed Kenny! And this goober pulling up to the bus stop the very next day like nothing happened, Matt and Trey finally gave Kenny's infinite respawn glitch a solid explanation by making him immortal. During Season 14's Coon and Friends saga, we finally get to learn Mysterion's powers and his superhero origin story. According to Kenny himself, he can't die. Not really anyways. Whenever he's killed, sometimes he sees a bright light, sometimes he sees heaven or hell. But no matter where he goes, all paths lead to his rebirth. Every time Kenny dies, his mom spontaneously gives birth to him that night, and Kenny wakes up in bed the very next day, fully grown, with no one around him having any recollection of his previous death, even if they witnessed it. Side note, when we were watching these episodes for the video, I forgot just how funny the confirmation of Kenny being Mysterion was.
Pull the trigger, you pussy!
Dude, Kenny, chill out.
As it turns out, Kenny's parents, Carol and Stuart, used to be a part of a cult that worshipped Cthulhu solely for the free booze. Sadly, it's implied that the cult might have taken advantage of Kenny's parents in their inebriated state. Johnny Tuccello's already pointed this out in his video centered around Kenny, but when Henrietta shows Mysterion the Necronomicon, there's an illustration of a baby lying in the center of a pentacle as 6 hooded figures perform a ritual, presumably in an attempt to bring Cthulhu and its friends into the world. Maybe this cult was trying to transform newborns into vessels for Cthulhu and other monsters to use, immortality being granted as a result. Either way, it's safe to assume that this is the ritual that granted Kenny his immortality after his parents were coerced into bringing their infant son to a meeting. Carol and Stuart letting a cult do this to their child in exchange for more alcohol just kinda checks out. According to the Goth kids, only an immortal can kill another immortal, but that doesn't get a chance to come into play, as Bradley, aka Mintberry Crunch, ends up having his epic chosen one moment instead.
You must now harness and focus your power, Kaxarag. The power of mint and berries, yet with a tasty, satisfying crunch.
So if an immortal can allegedly only be killed by another immortal, why did Kenny stay dead here in the future timeline? The Delta Plus rewards program variant of COVID might be strong, but strong enough to override immortality granted from a satanic ritual? I don't think so. Even if his death was an inside job, I don't think anyone has the tools necessary to put him out of his misery for good. A reasonable assumption may be that Kenny's mom passed away, and thus he lost his ability to reincarnate. But Carol is alive and well in the post-COVID timeline. So after thinking on it, I believe there are two likely scenarios that led to Kenny living the rest of his life as a normal guy. Well, normal genius playboy philanthropist. The first scenario is a fairly simple answer. As Carol McCormick got older, she entered menopause, the stage of life where women stop having their cycle and lose their ability to have children. If it's physically impossible for Carol to have any more kids, then it tracks that she can't pump out any more Kennys, ending his time as an immortal being. The only thing I really have against this idea is that having a child on the spot is already an impossible feat, so I'm not sure if the body changing with age would get in the way of what's pretty much a supernatural curse. It's not improbable, but I do think it isn't the most satisfying answer. So let's switch gears to scenario number 2. Something that I think is not only a more satisfying answer, but honestly, the more likely answer. I believe that future Kenny removed his immortality. To say Kenny hates his immortality would be an understatement. Bro is in a constant state of agony because of the fate he was dealt. Like when you get to the point you're casually self-deleting out of frustration, something has to change. And the older Kenny gets, the bigger of a burden this power of his becomes. An inevitability in getting older is witnessing the people around you die, and unfortunately, it won't always be someone passing away of old age. A lot of people die far younger than they should. So imagine being in Kenny's shoes, experiencing death over and over again, but against all odds, waking up to live another day while the people he grew up with gradually fade away. Imagine the survivor's guilt that would start to develop because he bounced back from falling into a pit of lava while Bebe died in a car crash or Tally overdosed. Imagine having such a huge disconnect from the people around you because they'd never be able to relate to the horrific things you've been through, nor would they even remember. Kenny has always been very ambitious, yet I've always got the vibe that as long as he had his friends, a roof over his head, and as long as his little sister was being taken care of, then he's happy with his life. I assume with how rich and successful Kenny became in his adult life, he would have ensured a better situation for his family, or at least Karen, if they weren't already in a better spot, protecting his sister with his millions instead of his hands. Kenny's whole motivation for being Mysterion was helping people, but once he became a scientist, humanitarian, and philanthropist, he was able to accomplish this without the mask. So what would be the need for Mysterion? This ain't Gotham, bro is living in Colorado. If there's no need for Mysterion, then what good does Kenny's immortality serve beyond giving my boy an existential crisis? Kenny now has all the money in the world, vast resources at his disposal, and connections that he didn't have when he was 9 years old. He's in a position to finally cure his immortality, and I believe that's exactly what he did. He could have done it through science, funding research and spending countless hours in the lab to make it happen. Bro was working with dark matter for boobs. Clearly the sky is the limit for him. He could have done it through connections, using his influence and networking to get in touch with another cult willing to perform a new ritual that would strip him of his immortality, turning him into just another human for the first time in his life, getting closure on the source of his powers and ridding himself of a miserable existence. Although he regarded the boys' friendship dissolving as the biggest failure in his life, desperately trying to find a way to bring them back together, Kenny still seems happy in his adult life. Like, look at that smile.
He wasn't cheesing like that as a kid.
Who cares if his hood was blocking his facial expressions? Shut up. And with the context of his removed immortality, it makes sense that he'd have a new lease on life. A life that is much more fulfilling than it's ever been, because now every day matters, as he never knows which one will truly be the last. And eventually, that last day on Earth did come, but it ultimately led to a better timeline. Which means, in a very weird, very twisted sense, Kenny's death, his real death, was his biggest accomplishment because he was able to help literally everyone through time travel. Something that was only possible because of him. I know Matt and Trey probably excluded Kenny's immortality from the post-COVID specials for simplicity's sake, not wanting to be held back by lore that's almost 15 years old, but screw it. It gives me some peace of mind thinking that Kenny was able to go out on his own terms, no longer being bound to this world because of something he didn't even ask for and had zero say in. So if you're ever watching South Park with the homies, and someone asks, why do you think Kenny never came back to life in the future? Hit them with a theory you heard from some geek on the internet. But as always, I want to know what you guys think. Why did Kenny lose his immortality in the future? Drop your takes in the comments below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram at OffStrictVox and at RoundtableVids. Check out Toondrip for some dope cartoon merch, and if you enjoyed this video, please sure to like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day. Peace!
It's totally safe. Kids aren't gonna see this. Well, the problem is you guys buy your kids phones, okay? Just like you buy them all these unhealthy hydration drinks.
Drink cred or you're a piece of
If you don't have cred, then everyone around you loses all their cred.
Well, what I really want to do is beat my wife.
Who do you work for? Who's trying to influence me?
South Park decided to end 2023 with a bang, dropping a new special that called out Logan Paul, Prime, OF, as in odd future. And honestly, they pretty much called out influencers in general, alongside themselves to an extent. And it's all due to one common denominator: kids. But as usual, they effortlessly combined their blunt commentary with hilariously crude yet clever antics that come together in a way that's very on brand for South Park.
Because I'm a sovereign citizen and I don't need to tell you anything.
God, I love Randy. I'm itching to talk about everything this special had to offer, from cred to Randy's hustle to even minors?
Oh God.
But before I unpack any of that, I need to unpack why the hell this special basically dropped with little to no fanfare. But if you don't care about any of that, just skip to this timestamp.
I can't feel my face!
Not Suitable is a special that feels like it came pretty much out of nowhere, but you may already know that it's a much messier story than that. To quickly recap, South Park Studios has a deal with Paramount to deliver 2 specials a year on their platform. This year, we got the Paniverse special during October, but for a minute, it kinda seemed like we weren't getting another special before the end of 2023. They have a track record of announcing specials at least 2 weeks ahead of time. Yet we were in the middle of December with no announcements in sight. And to make things weirder, producer and lead storyboard artist Greg Postma posted about the episode being done earlier in the month. So if the episode was already done, was there something holding it up? Well, definitely. Last weekend, YouTube started advertising the Not Suitable special before videos, playing a teaser nobody had seen before for a special we knew nothing about until this point. And the cherry on top? The teaser claimed the special was already streaming, with the description mentioning a release date of December 13th, a few days earlier in the week. Let me tell you, I opened up Paramount Plus, and it straight up wasn't there. Then, after I made my video about the situation, fans reported sightings of not only new ads popping up over the internet, but physical posters and billboards around major cities like New York, revealing the Prime parody with a new release date of December 20th. That was in like 3 days. But sure enough, the special dropped on December 20th, a little bit after midnight on the East Coast. With Paramount and the South Park team staying silent on the matter, our best bet on figuring out what happened and why this special was delayed lies within the special itself. And honestly, I think it has to do with Randy. We all know South Park as a show that does and says whatever the hell it wants. And for the most part that flies on Comedy Central, a cable channel that's only become more lax over the years as more people cut the cord. Even then, South Park's had to meet the S&P halfway, although they still get away with a lot more antics than your average adult cartoon. But Paramount Plus is a different beast, mostly because they're desperate for money, and they exist on the internet, not cable. Why do these factors matter? Well, because Paramount Plus doesn't just rely on subscriptions, they're also supported by ads. If you choose their basic tier, which I assume most people would. I don't have another $12 for a streaming service, I don't know what to tell you. And if you heard of a little something called the adpocalypse, you'll know that if your content isn't deemed advertiser friendly, then those advertisers can pull the rug out from under a platform's feet and take their business elsewhere. All of this is to say, Paramount Plus is kinda bitch made. Not only have they pulled classic episodes of SpongeBob off the platform in the US, but internationally, not only is there reportedly a ton of South Park episodes missing, but they even pulled episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And the only reason they're not pulled in the US is because those shows aren't on Paramount Plus yet. In my opinion, it's very apparent that Paramount is afraid of pissing off advertisers and customers because they want to be a squeaky clean family-friendly platform like Disney Plus, but they also know they can't just not capitalize on adult animation when they own South Park. And I think this is the first time those two agendas have collided with each other. This episode's B-plot is centered around Randy having an OF, and there's numerous scenes of his uncensored shaft on display, and I think Paramount tried to push back on that latter half. Come on, be real. Matt and Trey fighting with Paramount to keep Randy's dick intact just sounds like another Wednesday for them. But maybe there's a little bit more than that. I think what's most telling is how this special is being advertised now that it's released. Only one ad focuses on the OF plot, the ad that first circulated through YouTube, while everything else focuses on the cred story. My own conclusion is that Paramount got cold feet over the idea of marketing this special through its OF subplot because, ironically enough, they were afraid of kids seeing it and the implications that could have, which could ultimately upset advertisers. What happens if a family gathers around the TV for a movie night, decides to give Paramount Plus a whirl, only to get this ad beforehand? How long before parents with a stick up their ass storm social media with angry tweets directed at Paramount? So they backed down from the original December 13th release and quickly reworked the marketing campaign to focus on cred, portraying the special as more of a dig on Prime than it is a satire of OF, staying in the good graces of advertisers in the process. Granted, they kept the formerly leaked ad on their channel, so maybe they're still running it on videos, which throws a wrench in this whole theory, but I really don't know what else it could be. If you have any ideas on how this all shook out, share them in the comments. But enough yapping about this, let's talk about the actual episode. And to kick things off, I got a question for ya. Got cred? If I had a nickel for every time a South Park special opened up with Cartman waking up, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice, right? This special hits the ground running by giving us another Cartman song that's all about cred, a new hydration drink that has ensnared the students at South Park Elementary in a vicious battle for social validation. It is insane. Cartman's fridge is stocked with all sorts of crazy flavors, and he's got a backpack rig to keep 2 bottles on deck at all times. This fucker Spencer can fit 4! Nathan obviously was going to be in his bag with this. Bro thinks he's Walter White. Tolkien's dipping his fries in cred, which honestly seems like a depression meal. Get through that, buddy. Everybody's rocking cred. It's like the thing to drink right now. Man, imagine not drinking cred. I couldn't think of taking such a colossal L at— Clyde doesn't have cred?
Thanks a lot for making sure your son is the only kid in school without any cred!
Okay, this actually transported me back to grade school, and all the times I felt isolated because I didn't have the new game everyone else was playing, or brought a packed lunch on the days everyone else was eating pizza. Very minuscule things that didn't mean shit in the long run, but when you're that young, and your only responsibilities are homework and hashing out your Christmas list, that stuff weighs on you. The social aspect of school feels more crucial than any math test, and I really like how this special leans into that. It adds a charm to the show that a lot of people argue has been lost over the years. While South Park definitely hasn't shied from tackling the world today through the lens of a kid, TikTok and ChatGPT being examples from just this year, a common criticism has been that the kids kinda just feel like mini adults now. That they don't even act like kids anymore, and instead mouthpieces for what Matt and Trey have to say. While I don't fully agree, it's a fair sentiment to have when we go from Cartman getting belittled by Randy for trying to be a cop, to the boy effortlessly becoming a real estate agent and a successful entrepreneur with no one questioning him. But I think this special manages to be a great return to form in that aspect by focusing on something that affects kids more than anyone else. This premise forces all the major players in the story to be kids who are in over their heads, which lends itself to feeling more like those golden years of the show. Yet, in spite of this vintage vibe the special has, it's also the first time the South Park crew has really felt like a reflection of Gen Alpha, because they get to show how these relatively new things, like influencer branded products, can actually have a lasting impact on a kid's social life. It's honestly really eye-opening for me as someone who doesn't have kids. But yet, reflecting on my own experiences in middle school and high school, when the internet became a bit more ingrained into everyday life, I can completely understand why these kids became obsessed with cred. Why is cred such a big deal? Why does Logan promoting it have such a ripple effect on kids to the point where they're killing each other to get their hands on it? Well, they give us the answer pretty early on when Clyde is watching one of Logan's vlogs. Side note, Clyde is logged into his dad's account, which is a hilarious detail given how a running gag in this special is that kids obviously lie about their age online and it screws with the metrics. Also, all of these titles and thumbnails had me rolling. From challenges to a giant red arrow, the team behind South Park is really locked into YouTube's current landscape. They could be watching right now. Content creators have largely replaced big-name actors as role models, and they've replaced television as the primary form of entertainment. Most kids don't grow up with cable, and streaming largely prefers the binge model. Shows don't stay in the zeitgeist for too long. They have the same staying power as movies now. Nowadays, you'll watch one, see a few memes about it, and then in a month or two, people have already moved on to the next one. When it comes to entertainment, influencers have become the consistent presence in a kid's life. They're the one who are occupying kids' free time year-round instead of an ongoing television season. And it's arguably way more enticing because it's real people living these dream lives that kids can project onto. Logan's content panders to kids by targeting their common insecurities and frustrations. The feelings of loneliness, not being accepted, and being misunderstood by older generations. Now, talking about these things isn't bad in isolation. The problem arises when he slips in calls to action between his points and tries to spin product placement as solution to these issues. By the way, did you know that only -5% of you are subscribed to the channel? LeDouche markets himself as a relatable, vulnerable role model that kids can look up to, while also setting impossible standards for them to reach. I mean, just look at his state-of-the-art studio with some pretty impressive life achievements just chilling on the wall. Humble flex. He's literally dressed by his sponsors. From his headphones to his underwear, trying to appear as relatable to your low to middle class audience, while at the same time flexing your high class lifestyle, is never going to feel authentic to anyone but kids. And their takeaway is gonna be, I want to be cool like Logan. He has it all, and he keeps it pushing through the drama. But I don't have any money to get designer shoes, and I'm too young to drive a fancy sports car. But I can get my mom to buy me a drink. They sell it right down the street. Logan's the face of this drink, Logan is cool, and I want to be cool. And of course, this quickly snowballs into every kid showing off their cred, letting everyone know that they're cool, and people like Cartman overcompensating, hoping to win everyone's approval, because everyone already hated him. And I love the escalation throughout this special. Clyde buys some cred off Nathan. It's a bootleg. He tries to redeem himself by scoring some limited edition mega cred. It makes Black Friday look like light work.
Start the car! Start the car!
When they track down Logan for answers, they find out what we already knew. He was only in it for the money. He didn't promote this stuff because he truly believed in it. He promoted it because he believed that it would make him richer. He wasn't concerned about the impact it'd have on kids until the damage was already done. a theme that this special also explores with Randy. Logan, like many influencers, has made himself a vehicle for companies to push their products through. The last leg of this special feels like it's rehashing Japanese Toilet just a tad, especially since we just got that episode earlier this year, but I still enjoyed it. Clyde's stepmom Janice being the one trying to influence Clyde was a cool twist. It shows how parents kinda just leave it to creators on the internet to raise their kids for them. Before, you could just stick them in front of a TV when you needed a breather. Now you can just shove an iPad in their face at any inconvenience. And then they can just get mad at the creator when they say or do something the parents didn't like.
I just wanted to be a good influence on you, Clyde. But influencing kids these days requires good lighting and a quality microphone.
I was surprised to learn that this special didn't exaggerate the carnage that went down for this drink, at least as much as you would have assumed. Now, prior to this special, I wasn't completely out of the loop with Prime. I remember the announcement and thinking it was absolutely surreal seeing it pop up at my gym. And I tried Prime Energy before on a day where I didn't have pre-workout. It was alright, but I don't think I'd come back to it. Celsius is my current jam. Gotta die before 40, you feel? But I was absolutely clueless that Prime had this chokehold on children. But after looking into it, it makes perfect sense. I kind of assumed all the Paul Brother fans from back in the day just kind of grew up and moved on, but obviously when they age out of that demographic, more kids would age into that demographic. And now that he's been boxing for some time, it makes sense that he would capitalize on that without losing his target audience. There are more and more kids getting into fitness culture at a young age thanks to the advent of gym talk. Which, to be clear, I obviously don't think hitting the gym is a bad thing, but I do imagine you're gonna hold yourself to very high standards if you're in middle school or high school, and you're seeing a bunch of jack teens on the internet. But staying on topic, obviously the bright colors and candy-like flavors are going to appeal to kids and teens more than adults. When I first saw the billboard for this special, I thought that Cred was going to be Credigree's take on Prime, Tolkien's dad expanding markets to cash in on people who are too young to buy weed, which could have been fun. But no, it's just straight up about Logan Paul, or Logan LeDouche. But really, I think there's a reason they don't just say Logan Paul, despite it clearly being him, and mention that Prime is its own separate entity. It's the same reason why Andrew Tate popped up in this year's season finale, but was called Alonzo Fininsky, or why Harry and Meghan were Canadian and never referred to by name. It's all just Paramount trying to dodge a lawsuit since, again, they're pretty bitch made. Keep in mind, it's only the celebrities being criticized that have name changes now, whereas before the show just didn't care. Plenty of influencers portrayed in this special have their actual names used, but I think someone at legal is concerned that if a celebrity has their fifis hurt, then they can't actually be called out by name. Even though celebrities, especially influencers, usually see being parodied by South Park as a badge of honor. Even Logan Paul seemed pretty flattered by this special, recreating the Cred ad pretty much immediately, and while it seems like the point definitely flew over his head, do you really think it's news to Logan that he's a douche who profits off of children? I thought that was like his whole brand. Anyways, I don't know if the kids learned anything from all of this, but Randy definitely did. So let's talk about our favorite man-child. The B-plot has Randy on the other side of the discourse, as he's inspired to start an OF after learning that Mrs. Streeble is making bank running one on the side. What the fuck? I love how they use a random teacher who's only had like 2 speaking appearances. Randy's become very money motivated in recent years, so honestly this episode just kinda wrote itself. From Randy's absolutely unhinged content, to the auction that had me in stitches, to him being overly critical of Shannon's content, overlooking the fact that she's getting absolutely destroyed by another man. But I mean, we know how Randy created the virus, and he told Sharon to start an OF in the first place, so I guess he gave her a pass in the name of money. Alright Randy22, I see you. Even though this subplot is mostly just great rapid-fire comedy that reiterates the message a lot, it really couldn't have come at a more perfect time given the current state of social media. As Randy tries to diverse his OF content in the hopes of expanding his audience, he ends up pandering to kids after incorporating Cred, but he denies such a correlation could even exist, since Cred says it's not suitable for children.
According to Meta and TikTok, their audience is predominantly people over the age of 22. That means it's not kids who care about Cred, it's adults who want to see my dick.
Of course, this is also poking fun at the show itself, how South Park has always been an adult animated series that happens to appeal to children through its simple art style and bright color palette. Certainly what made me a fan at 6 years old. No one has as much free time and as little responsibility as kids, which is why they make up a strong majority of the internet. Right now, Twitter is the worst it's ever been, and a huge factor as to why is the erotic spam bots and invasive OF models who bombard the replies of any popular tweet with pictures and videos of them getting their back blown out. There's even accounts that will promote models under the guise of a roast, prompting said models to reply to the tweet with, you guessed it, another snippet of content, being boosted to the top thanks to Elon's pay-to-win system. Now don't get me wrong, I love titty and I love ass, but there's a time and a place, and the replies of a stolen viral tweet just ain't one of them. Because there are kids on this site, bro, and there's a difference between promoting content on your 18+ page and promoting content under the replies of some random guy's tweet or a gimmick account that's meant for everyone. This special makes the argument that if kids are the main ones being exposed to this, then they're also the ones who are gonna be buying it. Which is really bad, because kids are impressionable and copy what they see. You know what I mean? It was a perspective I never really considered before, and you know what? I'll just take South Park's word for it. Overall, I think this is one of my favorite specials so far, right below the two post-COVID specials, and above Panderverse and the Streaming Wars. Although the Streaming Wars are the only pair of specials that I don't really care for. I really like how they switched up the cast for this one, giving Clyde and Cartman the spotlight, which definitely makes sense for a story like this, since I couldn't see Stan or Kyle getting as invested in Cred, although they clearly care enough to stay strapped. I adore how Randy has the big "what I learned today" speech that usually goes to Kyle, as it cements the responsibility adults and influencers have in this situation. It wouldn't have made as much sense for one of the kids to have the big speech. And from a production standpoint, this special was crazy. Although we didn't get any spectacular redesigns for the characters this time around, the team really went the extra mile during the big store stampede and its aftermath. And I love how the influencers at the auction were designed in great detail, with things like the ripped jeans, styled hair, and AirPod Maxes. And I'ma just say it, the ball physics on Randy were wild. It's not the first time we've seen them, but it certainly felt like the boldest. This was a pretty solid end of 2023, and the most controversial season of South Park in years. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours. Where does the special rank amongst the others for you? Do you think everything landed, or did they miss the mark a little bit? Let me know in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Insta at OstricVox. If you enjoyed this video, please throw it a like, and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. See ya!
Well, here goes, guys.
Randy, we have a big problem!
We're talking a 60% hit to the business.
Rich people get Ozempic, poor people get body positivity.
We're not here to just make money. We're here to make things fair and to make some money.
These people think they can just come in and mess with everything we've built. I'm in deep, Stan. I should have never worn this midriff shirt to school.
Tony the Tiger killed Kenny!
After skipping a winter season in order to roll out an election episode in the upcoming fall, South Park has finally delivered its first piece of animated content in 2024 with the 7th Paramount Plus special, The End of Obesity. Also, yeah, I'm ignoring that mid-ass Snow Day game. Give me a third RPG, a Good Times with Weapons style fighter, or nothing at all. In my opinion, this is without a doubt the best special they put out since the start of these streaming exclusive events with post-COVID. While it doesn't feel as grand or cinematic as those specials, it's still a huge step up from the Streaming Wars or Not Suitable, which just felt like really long episodes of the show, even if I really enjoyed the latter one. And unlike the Panderverse, which I felt like it didn't get as crazy with the multiverse concept as it could have, this special does a great job of escalating its relatively simple premise into complete utter chaos in a way that only South Park can. The social commentary was on its A game. Randy's B story didn't feel disconnected from everything for a change. The cereal mascots added a healthy dose of absurdity, and most importantly, the boys' friendships served as the emotional core of the story. For once, everyone's rooting for Cartman. All of this blends together to create a banger of an event that feels borderline nostalgic. A South Park adventure that we could have gotten in that golden age from the 2000s to early 2010s. I have a mighty need to gush about why this special worked so well for me, so kick back and roll up some great integrity as I break down South Park, The End of Obesity. Covering a topic like Ozempic allows this story to involve the entire town in a pretty organic way, as not only does obesity affect people of all ages, but so does vanity. One is clearly screwing over the other though, as Cartman's unable to get a prescription to Ozempic despite his health being on the line. Insurance companies are only paying for the medication if the patients have diabetes, not if they're just trying to lose weight. Being denied a prescription really messes with Cartman. He's vocal about hating the way he looks and feels like he lacks the willpower to make a meaningful change without medication. But Kyle argues that willpower in this instance also includes not just taking no for an answer, being persistent and trying to get a claim filed with the insurance company to get the prescription he needs.
And obesity is a disease. Oprah Winfrey said so.
I didn't realize I was dealing with someone who had so much determination.
This special does a great job at portraying Cartman in a sympathetic light because he's just a kid. If Randy's B story was centered around him trying to lose weight, I think a lot of people would have just gone,
"You're a solid bitch."
He's a grown-ass man with a thriving business whose health isn't on the line, and evidently he has a much easier time getting his hands on Ozempic than Cartman. Bro gave himself cancer just to score some Luigi lettuce. If he wants to make something happen for himself, he's able to go out and get it. But Cartman doesn't have the income or resources that Randy has. He's like 10. He can't just get his money up. I doubt that ice cream parlor would be paying him enough to afford a prescription. He's a great example of someone who the system is actively failing. Someone who really does rely on something that's become a fad by the people who don't need it. I love seeing Kyle help out Cartman on principle, because we know Cartman has put this boy through the ringer, yet Kyle disregards all of that the moment he sees that Cartman is another victim of the American healthcare system. It perfectly illustrates both his values and his complex dynamic of Cartman. Putting a lot of time and energy going from insurance companies to medical centers to imaging centers back to insurance companies, filling out the same form over and over again, all to help someone who will probably send him anti-Semitic memes the next week. Why? Because Kyle believes helping Cartman is simply the right thing to do. These two really are frenemies. Kyle couldn't give up on Cartman if he tried. It's already in his nature to help people, but I think he recognizes that for how evil Cartman is. On some level, there's a troubled kid who could be set on the right path if he got the help he needs. The problem is, aside from the rampant anti-Semitism, Cartman is prone to putting on a facade and acting like he wants to better himself as a person just to get something he wants out of Kyle or other people around him. It's why Kyle questions if Cartman's being genuine when he first sees him bawling his eyes out. He's used to his kindness being taken for weakness by Eric. But once it's clear bro is being genuine, he's willing to go to great lengths to get the guy some help. Even when Cartman is on the verge of relapsing, Kyle's the one to get through to him and convince him to spare his stomach from the horrors of the Oppenheimer.
You know, Cartman, this could be dangerous.
Cartman's past transgressions aren't held against him by Kyle at any point in the special, and it's honestly really admirable. Could it be me? No, but it's admirable nonetheless.
There's celebrities and rich people using these new drugs to lose a few extra pounds, and meanwhile, Cartman's fat as f***ing can't get any help.
Although Ozempic is the focus of the special, this really does feel applicable to just about anything in the world of healthcare. It hit close to home for me personally, reliving various situations where I was either the Kyle or the Cartman, and in both cases, dealing with it sucked. The phone calls, the waiting rooms, all the driving around. It really is a time-consuming process where you start to lose your mind like Butters. And it's maddening, because as Kyle says, the insurance companies, drug companies, and hospitals work together to make these drugs more expensive in America than anywhere else in the world.
That's true. That's like 100%. Everything you said was true.
The snippet of the medical advisor vetoing Cartman's prescription from his yacht really says it all. The medication is ultimately being kept out of his tax bracket.
Fill out these forms?
I just filled them out the last place.
I don't think it's going to be super eye-opening for a lot of Americans, as people have been more vocal than ever about how garbage our healthcare system is. But it's definitely cathartic to see South Park break it down in this way, showing us that not even Cartman should be denied a path to a healthier life because that path is locked behind an absurd price tag. This entire A story really feels like classic South Park. Well, classic in my eyes, which I already gave away as the 2000s to early 2010s. It starts with Butter's song about navigating the American healthcare system, feeling like a nice little throwback. throwback. But once Stan and Kenny get roped in, and the boys start making their own obesity drugs, the special really starts recapturing the magic of its glory days. That's not to say it's only good because it panders to my nostalgia, but more so that South Park has always been at its best when all the boys are involved in these larger-than-life adventures where they're in over their heads and wound up entangled with very powerful people who should not be beefing with kids!
Who needs hospitals and insurance when we have TikTok and YouTube?
This tried and true formula lends itself perfectly to the social commentary as well, as although the boys have a whole makeshift lab to create their own weight loss drug, they're just following TikTok tutorials on how to make semaglutide, demonstrating how when the system fails its people, the people will always find another way to get what they need, which is easier to do now more than ever, with people posting tutorials for just about anything online. I'm no expert on the world of bootleg drugs, but I have seen DIY Adderall instructions on my For You page before that look just like this, so deal with that what you will. I love how selfless Cal's motivation becomes here, wanting to make their affordable weight loss drug accessible to everyone as a way to get Big Pharma the finger. It's a great contrast to last season and Cartman's money-motivated agenda in Dick and Boss hot dogs. And in both cases, you have Butters just trying to catch a bag. Neither worked out for him, but third time's a charm, buddy. Hold your head up for season 27. I also like what they do with Cartman in this special. Despite being portrayed in a more sympathetic light, he's still the evil little shit he's always been. And it's awesome! He's not killing his half-brother's parents and turning them into chili, or ruining a little girl's life until she's a carbon copy of him. But his biggest motivation for losing weight is that he'll be able to insult anyone he wants and be racist without consequence. Because what are they gonna clap back with? He's not fat anymore! Even the collective population of Pakistan can't muster a response.
Well, you are a normal person!
It's just so funny how the show effectively makes you feel bad for Cartman due to how relatable his situation is, on top of the fact that he genuinely loathes his body. Yet Cartman winning just means he'll have more confidence to act like a piece of shit. A Cartman story that makes you feel just a tiny bit conflicted tends to be a pretty good one. Yeah, skinny Cartman was a lie. His whole inclusion in the marketing for this special was a misdirect. Clickbait so Paramount Plus could rake in some subscriptions they can flex on their quarterly earnings call. I don't know how I didn't see this one coming when his daydreams and nightmares have been a plot device for eons now. But after Pandaverse, you never know what direction these specials could go in. This design still cracks me up though. They got Cartman looking like Twitter fan art with that hair. It does feel like a little bit of missed potential, but in my opinion, it's saved by the ending of the episode, which we'll get to later. And you know what? This is a good opportunity to get some nitpicks out of the way. So, number 1, where the hell was Scott Malkison in this special? He's like the poster boy for diabetes. His inclusion feels like a no-brainer. We have 50 minutes here, Matt and Trey. Number 2, Kyle has diabetes, but unless I missed a line or two, that never really comes up in this special, which I feel like was another missed opportunity given how invested Kyle becomes in Eric's health.
They say it's his kidneys. Kyle always has been a diabetic, and lately his kidneys have just been shutting down.
Number 3, Cartman eats like utter garbage to the point where I'm surprised he isn't at risk of developing diabetes himself. He eats something called a cereal bomb that's composed of a bucket of KFC, Cocoa Puffs, Captain Crunch, and milk. And there's gravy in that concoction? This is that greed they were talking about in the Bible. You can't tell me he's keeping both his feet after eating this. If you use TikTok, scroll cautiously, because I know for a fact food influencers are going to start mukbanging this health code violation, which I'm sure Matt and Trey are anticipating. You are sick men. But seriously, if anyone knows if Cartman could eat like this regularly and not become diabetic, let me know in the comments. I'm not a know-it-all when it comes to the beaties. It just runs in my dad's side of the family, so I know what's getting me eventually. I exercise and cook my own food regularly, but I microdose Lizzo on cheat days. And on that note, nitpick number 4, Lizzo. Prescribing Lizzo and body positivity to people who can't afford Ozempic is a great joke. Don't get me wrong, but for a topical show like South Park, it feels like this came 4 years too late. Like I wasn't thinking, finally they're digging at Lizzo. I was more like, oh yeah, Lizzo exists. It was kind of a missed opportunity to not either have a recall for Lizzo, or revealing that long-term exposure to Lizzo causes a patient to start having body-shaming ideation. I don't know, maybe they like Lizzo. They said she was a pretty good singer, so they decided to go a little easy on her. Also, Lizzo gives Sharon diabetes so she can go on Ozempic, but not Cartman? I guess he wasn't listening to her music enough to start shitting out his ears. But because this all started with Cartman, you can't help but notice the plot convenience. It's not like Sharon used it anyway. And hey, Lizzo was a good sport about the reference, even if I think she didn't really get the joke.
I just feel like, damn, I'm really that bitch. I really showed the world how to love yourself and not give a fuck, to the point where these men in Colorado know who the fuck I am and put it on their cartoon that's been around for 25 years.
But another area where their special shines is with its central antagonist. Aside from Big Pharma. The cereal and junk food mascots. Representing the sugar companies, we have childhood icons such as Tony the Tiger, the Cocoa Puffs bird, Little Debbie, Captain Crunch, the Twinkies cowboy, and other familiar faces. Feeling threatened by the boys' affordable weight loss drug as it aid in low-income households cutting back on their sugar intake and thus cutting into their profits, the mascots take matters into their own hands to ensure production of this drug comes to a screeching halt. Their inclusion in this special definitely feels like a response to the Kellogg CEO suggesting that poor families should start eating cereal for dinner to combat rising grocery prices. Despite cereal prices rising about 28% over the last 4 years.
So we're advertising about cereal for dinner. If you think about the cost of cereal for a family versus what they might otherwise do, that's going to be much more affordable.
I'm all for innovation and marketing, but the idea of having cereal for dinner, is there the potential for that to land the wrong way?
We don't think so. In fact, it's landing really well right now, Carl.
Yeah, you can't be spotting this garbage when a box of cereal can run you anywhere between $6 to $8 nowadays. It is cheaper to buy a box of one of those gimmicky cereal bars than the regular cereal. Screw you, dude. For $6, I'm picking up some drumsticks or a cheap steak. It's a statement that just reeks of greed and desperation. Just in case you guys forgot, we profit off you fat fucks too. I'm glad his stupid ass said that though. It gave us great material for this episode. I got a kick out of these guys as villains. It's something else that felt like old school South Park, not just taking jabs at celebrities, but other fictional characters. Even their designs feel more simple and straightforward like the older seasons, instead of overly detailed and colored with a ton of gradients like the more modern seasons. Wait, how these member berries get in my mouth? Honestly, the mileage you'll get out of these cereal mascots depends on your sense of humor and how easily amused you are by characters marketed at children doing fucked up things. Usually South Park is one of the few shows that can always do it in a way that's juvenile, but clever enough in the characterizations to get a few laughs out of me, which is a long way of saying Captain Crunch lighting up a factory had me rolling. They add another layer of absurdity to everything that's going on, which helps elevate the scale of the special, especially when we hit the third act. But before we can talk about that, we gotta talk about our beloved drug addict, Randy. While the boys are navigating the American healthcare system, Randy once again becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy as he ends up hanging around the wrong crowd. Those who are using weight loss drugs for their own vanity and are actively dancing around the American healthcare system. And you know what? I can't really see anything wrong here. Of course, they're lying about where the weight loss is coming from, as to not ruin the illusion that hard work and consistency put them back in their prime. But just like real life, everyone knows. This is a pretty stellar B story. Randy's been regressing into a bigger man-child over the show's run, which they use to their advantage to put Randy in the shoes of basically a Degrassi protagonist. A teen wounding up in their own very special episode. A say no to drugs PSA. Except the drugs in this instance is for weight loss and non-addictive? Which doesn't really click with Randy at any point in this episode.
There's like nothing wrong with me!
Wow! You want half a breakfast burrito?
No, I'm good.
I love what they do with the moms of South Park in this episode, serving as secondary antagonists who start genuinely tweaking the moment their waistlines are in jeopardy, resorting to Ocean's 11 level activity to try and get their fix. The escalation is so entertaining to watch. I love how Randy went from trying to cheat on his wife to winding up in an action blockbuster. Aside from the parents of our main squad, it feels like a lot of the moms have just been kinda there for most of South Park's run. So giving them time to act completely unhinged was a good call in my opinion. Definitely didn't expect that when booting up this special. All the moms wearing outfits that expose their midriff so they can show off their abs was killing me. Even when they're out here robbing pharmacies, they gotta have their results on display. Out here looking like Fumiko from Chainsaw Man. Someone in my audience will get that reference. Probably. These Ozempic parties are a real thing, by the way. This is really how all the rich moms in LA spend their Tuesdays. Scrounging up as many injections as they can, and sharing it all with the girlies. Now, I'm not saying I'd pull a Randy and go to one of these parties, but I'm also not saying I wouldn't. If there's one thing I wish this B story shed some light on, it's the side effects of Ozempic that are largely ignored. Like how it can age the hell out of your face. It would have been a great note to end on. Having the moms freak out at the side effects and swearing off the drug. Switching to like plastic surgery parties instead. We have Linda remarking that Ozempic gave her the shits, but that's really about it.
So, Alexis Testerberger just decided to start taking the drugs.
Wait, Wendy's mom is named Alexis? If we're keeping it in a book, this is more of a Randy and Sharon story than exclusively a Randy story. Randy is definitely more of a driving force, but it starts with the both of them giving input on Shelly's outfit. Randy taking the classic dad stance of wanting his daughter to cover up as much skin as possible because he knows how boys are. And Sharon taking the classic mom stance of not wanting her daughter to feel ashamed of herself because of how other people might react to her body, permitting Shelly to wear her crop top to school. Sharon is the one who first encounters all the moms showing off their washboard abs. And she carries the emotional core of this B story on her back, as Randy's deflection and body shaming leads to her actually feeling self-conscious about her body. To which she then goes on Lizzo, develops diabetes, and finally secures a prescription to Ozempic, only to be talked out of her first dose by Randy. She's the center of the B story's through line, and I find it to be a nice change of pace. We have plenty of stories where Randy is an idiot, but I feel like a lot of the time, especially in recent years, Sharon's usually just on the sidelines, waiting for Randy's short-sighted scheme to blow up in his face, or not wanting to be involved with any of it. I'm glad she had the chance to be an actual character here. It makes the end to their storyline all the more satisfying as they just talk things out like adults. A conversation that makes a pretty good point that a lot of people taking these drugs need to hear. No one cares if you're taking Ozempic.
I do.
No one important cares if you're taking Ozempic. You're a grown-ass adult with your own disposable income. Buy the Aussie if you want. We're not your mother. Just own up to it. Yeah, it's a cheat code. For $1,200, it better be. Your metabolism's never gonna be what it used to. Calorie deficits and hikes are only gonna get you so far in a short time frame, and everyone knows Americans have no patience anymore. You're not fooling anybody with your claims that rock climbing and a gluten-free diet sculpted those abs. Yes, insurance companies are screwing over people who really depend on it. But that shouldn't make it your dirty little secret. You're not perceived as any more of a good person because you're lying about your weight loss method. The pointy needle still went into your skin either way. Own up to the fact you're screwing over the less fortunate, damn it! Sharon doesn't judge Randy for taking Ozempic, and Randy, failing to realize throughout this entire adventure that Ozempic is supposed to curb your cravings, reduces him to bad product, and decides to do some hard shit with his wife in the Holiday Inn. But before we get there...
I should have never worn this midriff shirt to school! Certain things just aren't appropriate to wear!
We have to talk about this insane third act. With everyone trying to get their hands on the semi-glutide, the road becomes rather furious in this Mad Max-inspired chase scene. There's a lot to enjoy about this set piece. You got mascots using cereal to blind drivers, and the moms double-dosing Ozempic so they can Hulk out? It's a great time! Not to mention there's plenty of great character interactions sprinkled throughout this brawl, like Butters beefing with his mom, which was something I was keeping an eye out for all episode. We also get our first Kenny death in eons. I know he died in post-COVID, it was the catalyst of that entire special, but we didn't actually get to see it. It broke my heart a bit seeing Cartman trying to hold on to Kenny as Tony the Tiger yanks him out of the car and sends him right to the pearly gates. Another great interaction though. Reminds you that Kenny really is Cartman's best friend. Not too many people are gonna try to save their homie from an anthropomorphic tiger. The punchline to this entire scene had me belly laughing. Definitely the hardest I've laughed at South Park in a minute. It all comes full circle. This is how you do a South Park special, man. If you're not shooting for the stars like the post-COVID specials, where we're getting everyone aged up and placed in a new status quo, this should be the bar in my opinion. The A story and B story were both focused on the same topic, the jokes mostly hit, once again the commentary was on point, and it surprisingly ends with another Cartman victory. Kyle encourages everyone to embrace body positivity, to which Cartman responds exactly how you would expect.
You dress like a bitch! Hello, ma'am, you got a big nose! Hey, do I know you? Fuck you!
Was South Park The End of Obesity another special that felt like a really long episode instead of a cinematic event like the first two specials? Yeah. But, unlike the previous specials, this is the format at its best. No time felt wasted. They gradually upped the ante so the special is constantly building momentum. I really can't envision what a half-hour version of this would look like without losing something good. I think it's the third best special we've gotten so far, right underneath the two post-COVID ones. But hey, maybe you disagree and hated this thing, so why not sound off in the comments? I'd love to hear what y'all think. And if you haven't peeped the special already, this video may have spoiled you extensively, but still check it out. And if you enjoyed this video, please throw it a like, and subscribe to the Roundtable for more South Park content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace. South Park's back. And so is Garrison and Trump, but they're no longer the same person. Instead, we got the show's fourth rendition of the president that is a drastic pivot from previous incarnations, while managing to be both a callback and one of the most unique portrayals of Trump in adult animation. The new Trump is just one of many layered decisions found in the season premiere, but the one that has captivated me the most because it cements this episode as one of the biggest you just had to be there moments in South Park history. Daring Trump to sue Paramount and have the company cancel the show only a literal day after they handed Matt and Trey $1.5 billion to produce the show for 5 more years, along with a streaming deal. So let's break down South Park's new little dictator who could, and how the creators are really just provoking Trump because they're trying to give Paramount as much hell as possible as payback for the legal battle that forced the show into a 2-year hiatus, along with Paramount canceling the Colbert Show, as they clearly believe it sends a message.
You really want to end up the Colbert? Just shut up, or we're going to get canceled, you idiots!
South Park has given Donald Trump many forms over the years. The first Trump was introduced in Season 5's The Entity, as one of the investors for Garrison's new vehicle, the It Bike, a viable alternative to airline travel that's operated by the pilot getting nasty with it.
Hey, it still beats what you go through at the airports.
Trump didn't do anything remarkable in this episode. He was more or less a background character, as he flew under Matt and Trey's radar. Keep in mind, this episode aired before The Apprentice was even a thing, so I think people saw Trump as just another famous rich dude. Fast forward 14 years, and Trump is now on everyone's radar after announcing his candidacy in summer 2015. Something that shocked many people in and outside of America, as his campaign was put around his status as a successful tycoon, as opposed to a politician, portraying himself as someone who could truly speak his mind without political bias, a position that evidently spoke to a lot of voters. All of this piqued Matt and Trey's interest. They seemed to be amused that so many people could get behind something that was clearly a bad idea. However, they knew that Trump thrived off attention, and they probably didn't want to get sued. They didn't have fuck you money yet, so instead of depicting him directly in the show, they introduced the Canadian president in Season 19's Where My Country Gone that aired in the fall of 2015. Canadian president was clearly Trump in every way but his name, though he sported the Pac-Man-like head and rectangular build that all Canadians in the series have. Canadian president was elected as the country's citizens resonated with him being, and I quote, a brash asshole who spoke his mind. Or at the very least, they were amused by that. But they let the bit go too far, allowing him to get into office and changing Canada for the worse, causing many Canadians to flee to America. He even built a wall to keep us out.
I'm like, what did he say fuck me for?
You get the idea. Canadian president was Matt and Trey giving their target audience a good look in the eye and saying, don't do this. Not him. But surprise, surprise, people didn't listen. So although Canadian president was killed off at the end of this episode, the show introduced a third version of Trump, the longest running one in the show so far, by turning Mr. Garrison into a Trump stand-in. His reaction to the explosion of Canadian immigrants was already satirizing Trump's campaign, but Garrison continues to campaign with Caitlyn Jenner.
Buckle up, buckaroo.
Matt and Trey didn't expect Trump to stay in the race for as long as he did, let alone become president, so they found it more appropriate to stick Garrison in the role. Which honestly, yeah, that tracks. His character already went through a couple of eras. What's the harm in tossing Trump into the mix for a season? Oh, you mean the man actually became president? And since South Park already committed to Garrison being their Trump, the character is going to spend 4 real-life years as president in the show? Well, let that be a lesson in how not to do serialization when your show was made in a week. Garrison was no longer teaching at South Park Elementary, and it felt like he rarely appeared in the show for a couple of seasons. I remember he was the driving force of an It parody in season 21, but other than that, he was put on the back burner, though he finally returned to teaching in South Park after Trump lost the 2020 election, though we didn't get too many episodes with him, as the pandemic birthed the specials era of the show, where we had 6 episodes a year along with 2 streaming specials and a lawsuit that spanned multiple years. Once Trump geared up for re-election, the show revisited Garrison's days as president in the season 26 finale, Spring Break, where his Trump persona and love for rallying was treated as an addiction, one that's threatening his relationship with his boyfriend Rick. We like Rick, he's just a chill dude who really cares about Garrison. With the election feeling pretty up in the air when this episode was produced, it concluded on a note where Garrison and Rick just had to see how things would play out. Maybe Garrison would get re-elected and return to the White House, even if he didn't really want to. Or maybe he'll get his happy ending with Rick.
It is now official. CNN projects that Donald Trump has been elected president.
It's now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened.
Well, I guess we're losing Garrison for another 4 years. But hey, maybe they'll make the most of it and give us some funny President Garrison adventures. Or maybe they'll say screw it and split up the 2 characters. Prior to the premiere of Sermon on the Mount, South Park teased the return of Saddam Hussein, the former dictator of Iraq and Satan's dirtbag ex. Depicted with the typical South Park Canadian build, except his head and all his facial expressions were lifted from photos of the real deal. Saddam was one of the most memorable recurring characters in the show before falling to the wayside, save for a dramatic return in season 7, 22 whole years ago. With the show marketing the second coming of Christ, and the return of characters like Starvin' Marvin in footage that may or may not have been from a scrap special, Saddam's return didn't necessarily feel out of place. But oh, did Matt and Trey have a wonderful trick up their sleeves. With Trump being re-elected back into office, everyone expected Garrison to also move back into the White House, including the citizens of South Park, extremely dissatisfied with the state of the country and the president's tyrant-like behavior. Randy rallies his neighbors to storm Garrison's household, only to discover that Garrison passed on returning to the White House. He, Rick, and this cute-ass dog are living the good life and keeping a low profile. But if Garrison's in South Park, then who's in the White House?
A dictator from the Middle East? Hey, relax, guy.
Meet Trump 4.0, who I believe can best be described as Trump Hussein. Not only giving him the exact same voice as South Park Saddam, but animating him in the exact same fashion, with cutouts of Trump's actual head pasted onto a rectangular 2-dimensional body. As if that wasn't enough, they also paired him up with the Prince of Darkness himself, Satan, making his own return to the show for the first time in 7 years after getting demolished by Man Bear Pig. This Trump even has identical catchphrases to Saddam.
Saddam Hussein? Nah, relax, baby. I'm not telling everyone to relax. Relax, guy.
They really lean into the nostalgia factor, using Saddam's musical number from the bigger, longer, and uncut movie, I Can Change, as the backing track for these scenes, and emulating his relationship with Satan. The devil even references how similar Trump is to his former lover. There's already theories floating around that this Trump might be Saddam reincarnated, or that he's somehow possessed by the guy. But all things considered, they're likely 2 separate entities that behave and sound exactly the same, for no other reason than shits and giggles. Though, this is modern South Park we're talking about. They could easily make the circumstances of this Trump's existence a season-long mystery for all the binge watchers at home. This take on Trump is honestly pretty refreshing, as adult animated sitcoms usually do the same thing with the crazy hair, neon orange skin, same old impression, and the thing with the eyes. So everything about this take from both personality and characterization manages to really stand out when it's just live-action photos of Trump with South Park Saddam's personality. But as I said in the intro, going with this depiction was a layered decision. At face value, the best way to call out Trump's dictator-like tendencies is to use him as a surrogate for one of their old bits. But you have to question why they spent 10 years avoiding Trump's name, claiming they didn't want to touch the 2024 election because they had nothing else to say about him, only to go back on all of that in favor of being as on the nose as possible. What changed? Well, my friends, what we're witnessing is Matt and Trey indulging in the fine art of rage bait, attempting to get Paramount in trouble by pushing the president president's buttons. For the TLDR, Warner Bros. Sued Paramount for getting less new episodes of South Park than what they were contractually obligated to receive, as Paramount pocketed a couple of episodes for themselves by turning them into specials that were exclusive for Paramount Plus. A battle that Paramount was not going to win. And speaking of losing lawsuits, Paramount also had to pay up to Trump after he sued them over a 60 Minutes interview. While all of this is happening, Paramount is trying to merge with Skydance, who apparently is going to pay Trump $20 million in advertising after the merger is done. It reads as a bribe for the merger to go through. Skydance also interfered with Paramount's negotiations with Matt and Trey as they prepared for the show to head to Paramount Plus, causing its return to get delayed by 2 weeks after already having an unconventional premiere in the summer. Things were getting so heated that Matt and Trey were preparing to sue Paramount themselves. How many L's can one corporation take? During this delay, Paramount also pulled the plug on The Colbert Show, citing ratings as the reason for its cancellation. But popular opinion says it was just a way to suck up to Trump, an opinion that South Park obviously shares, as Jesus tries to warn the town that they shouldn't cause too much of an uproar unless they want to wind up canceled.
You really want to end up like Colbert? You guys gotta stop being stupid.
Now, no matter how you feel about Colbert, I think it's easy to see why Matt and Trey would be pressed by all of this. Social commentary and current events have been their bread and butter for half of their lives at this point. If it even remotely looks like their parent company is starting to censor the voices of anyone who opposes the president, they're not going to ignore it. And from their perspective, it's obviously not the craziest conclusion to come to when, once again, the company that's about to own them already tried to interfere with their business and is planning to hand Trump tens of millions of dollars. Obviously, the South Park creators know more about all of this than us, so for them to lean into the narrative that Colbert's cancellation was to please Trump speaks volumes. Now, obviously, South Park draws in a bigger audience than late night talk shows, especially in the Big 25, but I think they still got the vibe that Skydance might try to keep certain topics off limits once the merger is complete, the kind of limitations that could kill South Park as we know it. So what do once they close a very expensive deal with Paramount? A deal that guarantees that the show will be on for another 5 years? They send a message of their own. Skydance fucked with them and got the season pushed back after their pipeline already got screwed over by the specials and Warner lawsuit, so they're getting their lick back before more damage can be done. Calling out Trump in the most egregious way possible by comparing him directly to one of the world's most famous dictators and highlighting everything he's been scrutinized for, including his involvement in the Epstein files. If that's not crazy enough, they humiliate him with tiny dick jokes and a crazy AI bit that I don't think I can show on YouTube. Now they've pissed off the guy that the parent company is sucking up to, who has already sued said parent company before, daring him to take off the boxing gloves and go after Paramount once again, and putting their own show on the line just to stress out Paramount, who just spent 7 figures on this show. Canceling it would be one of the biggest displays of wasted money that we've ever seen. I'm sure breaking that contract wouldn't be cheap, but keeping it around will only sour their relationship with Trump, putting the Skydance merger at risk. And I'm sure Matt and Trey wanted to fall through at this point, as Skydance was giving them trouble before even officially being a part of the family. Knowing how vindictive South Park as a show can get, I wouldn't be surprised if this new Trump keeps popping up throughout the season, challenging our real-life president on a weekly basis. This isn't even the first time South Park has tempted fate and begged for the sweet release of death. Season 22's slogan was literally #CancelSouthPark, which was included at the end of every episode, partially to mock social media, but also because they know they're never going to be free of the show until Comedy Central kills it. That meta commentary is explored once again in this episode through Cartman, who's questioning his place in a world where it feels like hatred, bigotry, and apathy is the norm. Cartman being a pretty clear stand-in for South Park as a TV show. That being said, I think Matt and Trey know in their heart of hearts that they aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Cartman tries to take himself out alongside Butters by sleeping in the Stotch's garage with the car running, blissfully unaware that most electric cars don't release carbon monoxide, i.e., he was never in any real danger in the first place. No matter how far South Park takes it, the odds of them being canceled are slim to none. Overall, I'm pretty happy with Trump 4.0, as his presence helps emulate the old school vibes that the recent seasons and specials have been trying to lean into by incorporating characters and elements from those early seasons. South Park has felt more and more like a celebration of the franchise as a whole since the streaming era began, so I love that we have Satan and his dynamic with Saddam back in a way that keeps things fresh, along with Garrison in it for the long haul as a regular old teacher. And with the show having a clear target to rebel against, I'm excited to see what kind of shenanigans this season season we'll get into, as Matt and Trey have been reinvigorated. I'm really curious to see what the response to the season premiere will be, and the fallout of it all. So let's get the discourse rolling in the comments down below. How do you feel about this new take on Trump? How does it rank amongst our previous incarnations? Let me know in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram at OstricFox and at Roundtable Vids. If you enjoyed this video, please sure to like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great South Park content. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. Peace!